May I ask you all to stand for the prayer, please? Creator and sustainer of all things and all people, you are the source of all wisdom and light. Enlighten our minds to receive your guidance so that you may lead us into true wisdom. May all that we say and do in the service of this county, whether as elected member or as an officer, be in accordance with your will and for the good of your people. Amen. Evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, would everyone leave by one of the two exits at the rear of the chamber? Officers will be on hand to assist any disabled persons. Mobile phones. May I ask all members who have mobile phones with them to ensure that they are switched off so that they will not disturb this meeting. Agenda item number 1, Chairman's announcements. Residents from Great Glen. I would like to welcome the residents from Great Glen and appreciate that they are here to show the depth of feeling and concern from the village and its residents following the unprecedented flooding on the 6th of January. I am sure that they will be interested to hear about the proposal to set funding aside for flood improvements works in response to the recent flooding. I would also like to remind all members of the public of the ways in which they can engage with the democratic process to get their views heard, including submitting questions and petitions to the Scrutiny Committee meetings. Volunteer Award Evening. On Tuesday the 11th of March, I will be hosting a Volunteer Awards Evening here at County Hall for those who carry out volunteering on our behalf. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful evening and I'm so looking forward to the event. COVID, Day of Reflection. Sunday, 9th of March, is the COVID Day of Reflection across the United Kingdom. This year marks 5 years since the pandemic began. The COVID Day of Reflection gives us the opportunity to remember those who have lost their lives since the pandemic began and to honour the tireless work and acts of kindness shown during this unprecedented time. I would like to thank all staff across the County Council, the NHS, the emergency services, and in communities who supported people during the pandemic. It was a time where many staff and communities worked together in ways never seen before to protect, support, and help Leicestershire residents. County Council election. As this will be the last meeting of the County Council before the election in May, I want to thank those who are standing down for their service to the County Council and their constituents. And for those who are standing for election, I wish you well on the 1st of May. We move to the agenda items number 2, minutes. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 4th of December, copies of which have been circulated to members, be taken as read, confirmed and signed. Dr. Felton, will you second? Thank you very much, Dr. Felton. Agenda item number 3, declaration of interest. I invite members who wish to do so make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. I am assuming that all members who are members of district councils will wish to declare an other registrable interest in relation to the medium-term financial strategy 2025-26 to 2028-29. I am advised that the following members wish to declare a non-registrable interest in the MTFS. Mr. Payne, in relation to passenger transport issues as his family-operated taxi business, and Mr. Finnemore, in relation to special educational needs and disabilities issues due to his wife's employment. I am assuming that all members who are members of district councils will also wish to declare an other registrable interest in item 7C on the agenda, English Devolution White Paper Local Government Reorganisation. Are there any other declarations? Thank you very much. Agenda item number 4, questions asked under standing orders 7, 1, 2 and 5. The questions and replies set out in the order will be taken as read and entered into the minutes. I have received no notice of supplementary questions. What page? 18. We'll see. To dispose of business from the last meeting, agenda item number 5, report of the Constitution Committee. Review of standing orders, meeting procedure rules. Mrs. Taylor will move and Mr. Brecken will second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the changes to the standing order, meeting procedure rules as set out in the appendix to the report and Constitution Committee be approved.
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We will now take a vote on the motion. All those in favour, raise their hand. Got it? Yep. Any against? I don't believe there's any abstentions. Am I right? Okay. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 6, to receive position statements from members of the Cabinet. I now invite the acting leader to make a statement. When the acting leader has finished her statement, I will invite members to speak. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. I will then call you to speak. I will invite Mr. Hunt and Mr. Mullaney as leaders of the opposition to speak last before the leader's right of reply. Action Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just refer members to my full position statement. I'll just pick out some of the key points. So firstly, on the MTFS position. Firstly, I'd like to extend my thanks to all our officers for their dedication and hard work in pulling together a balanced budget for next year. Although the financial position continues to be difficult, this is a vital element in securing a sustainable financial position. Numerous challenges still lay ahead and we will need to continue to allocate resources carefully. Looking ahead, there are opportunities with local government reorganisation to deliver significant improvements to our financial position, which would not be otherwise possible. On to local government reorganisation. With the government rejecting our bid to be put on the fast track to deliver local government reorganisation, we are now focusing on revising the 2019 business case. This will inform our interim proposals, which we will submit to the government on the 21st of March. The business case highlights the potential for a more efficient, effective and community-focused local government structure with a single unitary council for Leicestershire, excluding Leicester City, resulting in a simplified and joined-up services, substantial financial savings and a stronger community voice and improved service delivery. I would remind members that the business case also included strong proposals for devolved decision-making through local area committees, area planning committees, and empowered town and parish councils. This would also include creating town councils in our market towns. We are planning an engagement exercise which will start shortly, and we will be asking the Scrutiny Commission for its views. The Cabinet will then finalise the interim proposal at its meeting on the 18th of March. We are still awaiting what the district councils are proposing, but a single unitary for Leicestershire, built on the existing district areas and respecting the existing city boundaries, will form the crucial building blocks for our proposal. Splitting the county in two is a non-starter, creating more pain than gain, fewer savings, more confusion, and unhelpful competition for staff. On to flooding that you also mentioned in your announcements, Mr. Chairman. So Monday the 6th of January saw the worst flooding event in recent history in Leicestershire. To date, an estimated 900 properties across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, and a confirmed 702 properties in Leicestershire have been flooded internally. The council was part of a multi-agency and community response to this devastating event. I want to thank everyone from the council and across the local Resilient Forum who worked tirelessly to deal with this crisis and help those communities so badly impacted. Without their efforts, things would have been considerably worse. We are now into the recovery mode, and as the lead local flood authority, we will be coordinating the work into identifying the causes and any potential solutions. Despite our intense lobbying, the government has not yet activated the National Flood Recovery Framework. This is incredibly disappointing, and we will continue to highlight to the government the significant hardship Leicestershire residents and business owners are facing. I am, though, pleased to confirm that the council has committed an additional £1 million towards flood alleviation, support and resilience as a part of an 18.4 investment on flood alleviation across the next 4 years of the MTFS period. On to Zoch Bridge. After several years of determined preparation work to design and fund the replacement of Zoch Bridge on the A6006 near Hathorn, construction of the bridge is finally underway. By building the new bridge and approach roads alongside the existing bridge, disruption will be minimised while this £19.5 million scheme, funded from the County Council's capital programme, is completed. When construction is completed in early 2027, the structural weight limit on the bridge can be removed. And finally, on to the Invictus Games. I'm sure members will wish to join me in sending huge congratulations and best wishes to Elizabeth Lee from the Council's Health and Safety Wellbeing team, who has been in Vancouver to represent Team UK in the Invictus Games in indoor rowing and alpine skiing, snowboarding, and we hope she does really well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Taylor. We have one questioner. Mr. O'Shea.
Thank you, Chair. Following on from the Acting Leader's statement, we've heard about the devastating flooding that we saw across the county in January. The extent of this event led to the Environment Agency issuing a highly unusual severe flood warning for small area of Charnwood, indicating risk of life. And with the National Emergency Alert System that was utilised to warn residents only for the 5th time the system has ever been used in this country. East Midlands Ambulance Service moved to critical status due to the pressures on the highway network and difficulty in reaching people safely. We saw over 160 roads flooded, with up to 55 being formally closed. Our highways and flood teams worked hard to help during the flooding, but it is now the recovery mode, as we've heard, and that we have a lot to do. We do not underestimate the significant physical, emotional and mental impacts that the flood events have on communities. We want to urgently speak with the government. We need the government to actually release the natural flood management. We have asked, and we are working hard with our MPs, hopefully, to take that forward to get the national flood management actually secured for the residents of Leicestershire for this. As this, before we had Storm Henk, that was granted, but these has not been granted. We're identifying solutions where some of we can secure funding from the government, but this will take time. However, property level protection must be the best option. I know that our Director of E&T is representing local authorities on the National Flood Resilience Task Force and is pressing for the points on how we deal with flooding. We need to change the way that we deal with flooding to be more effective and speed things up. As I said earlier, the government has not activated the flood recovery framework for the flooding on the 6th of January, but we will be lobbying government to do this. We will continue with that lobbying, but in the meantime, the additional money invested in the flooding by the council is very welcome, and will make a difference to those communities affected by the flooding in Leicestershire. Moving on to Zotts Bridge. The work began in August 2024, has programmed a pause between October 24 and February 25 to eliminate the risks of working in the floodplain during the winter months and to meet the environmental agencies' in-river working restrictions intended to protect fish spawning sites. This is an ambitious project on a key route. The bridge components will be assembled on the land next to the river, and due to the presence of the overhead high voltage cables, will then be guided into place using a jacking system. The work has been programmed to restrict road closures to the time periods when the main beams are delivered. When the new carriageway between the existing line of the A6006 and the new bridge is joined together and will be diverting the utilities. The existing bridge will be demolished and the old approach roads dug up so that the ground can be landscaped. I'm pleased to say that things are now starting to take place and looking forward to the work in progress. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. Mr. Mear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I welcome the acting leader's statement, especially on the MTFS. It's nice to see a Labour government giving more money to the County Council, and I'm sure we've got the budget debate coming up. Acknowledgement of that will be forthcoming from the acting leader. But let me touch on local government reorganisation. Actually, the government's objective is to get devolution to Leicestershire. We missed out with the East Midlands Mayor, but they've given us another opportunity to have devolution here in Leicestershire. And I believe the overarching aim of the government is to have a mayor, a strategic mayor for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, believe it or not. And I think we're agreed in consensus that that is the way forward, and potentially that's what's going to happen. So fast forward to today, so I'm very surprised that the acting leader has put out such a statement saying that actually she's put Rutland to one side, doesn't know what Rutland's doing, and local government reorganisation is something that she's going to backpedal on, because she did say in a previous statement, I believe, that the city boundary is going to be extended or potentially extended. I wonder why the backpedalling now. Maybe it's because of pressure from her MPs, Conservative MPs in the county, or her colleagues here in the chamber. Maybe it's a bit of both. Who knows? But obviously, this has come as a surprise that the city boundary limit seems to be off limit, as they say. However, I just wanted to point out the government's one of the things that they're looking for is obviously unitaries are about 500,000 in size potentially. They might accept something less. However, if we as Leicestershire put forward a proposal to say actually we'll have a unitary of 800,000 people, but the city can stay as it is at 370,000 people, is that being realistic? Is that something we think the government are going to accept? And if we think that, fair enough, but if we think the government aren't going to accept that one, then why is this red line all of a sudden now? And I can only think that there's an election happening in May, and a lot of my division boundary doesn't border the city, but I suppose some Conservative boundaries border the city, and they're panicking, unfortunately. And that's not strong enough, that's not strong enough reasons to come here and tell us that this should be the only way forward. It's our way or the highway. Districts obviously have a say, and I'll leave it up to the districts to meet with Councillor Taylor and put their proposals forward. But I would also encourage Councillor Taylor to reach out and meet with the districts with a different hat on. I think we've only met once with her, so it's just one of those. Let me touch on flooding though. Flooding, yeah, it devastated Charnwood. The Soar Valley gets flooded time and time again. County Council's done nothing in the time I've been here to alleviate any of the flooding in the Soar Valley at all. I'll be honest with you, I've been a councillor since 2009, and it's always flooded, and it's always flooded, and it's always flooded. My division flooded last year, it flooded again this year. I haven't seen any discernible difference from the County Council or County Council doing anything from last year to this year. So as a councillor, that's my experience. So if I don't have faith in the County Council, how are our residents going to have faith in the County Council? I'll just leave it there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mear. Mrs. Newton.
Thank you very much, Chair. I too want to speak on the flooding that goes on. My part of my patch is very low lying on the A6, and in the past I've used, I think, about 23,000 of my councillor budget to actually, when we used to get it, to actually put in flood invented initiatives. But I wanted to say a very big thank you to both Highways and the Fire Service, who are always very, very good at coming out when there's flooding in the patch. They come out, they help people as much as possible, and I think a thanks should go to both organisations for the help and support they give local residents when the flooding's very bad. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs Newton. Mr King.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. Thanks the Deputy Leader for her, Acting Leader for her position statement, and also Mr O'Shea for his comments also. I wasn't really going to say anything, but then what I've heard, I really couldn't not say anything. So what I wanted to talk about was, first of all, about flooding, and what I wanted to say was my experience as a member for Market Harbour West and Foxton is, first of all, it was very apposite that we had a flood fair in Market Harbour in the autumn. That was very helpful. But I think what we need to be clear about is we need a regular programme of these type of events, and residents need that to be communicated with them. I know we're doing that, but we also need to be much clearer with residents and our communities about what we can do and what we can't do as a county council, because it's not all down to us. A lot of this is down to the Environment Agency, and we don't run the Environment Agency. They're a non-governmental body, and they are run by a set of people, and they get their money from the government. So that is one of the problems that we have. Response to flooding isn't just down to us. The projects that get identified for funding aren't just down to us, but I think where we can, we are putting money forward in the MTFS, and that's very welcome to improve the capacity of what we can do, and that is very, very positive. But the thing I wanted to talk about was this local government reorganisation. So, first of all, the timeline has been set by the Labour government. The rules of engagement have been set by the Labour government. We didn't ask for it, they're forcing it on us. And I've listened to Mr Mear, and I think he needs to talk to some of his district colleagues about the story they're putting out in different parts of the county, because what you're saying and what they're saying aren't the same thing. And I think it is disappointing that we're in this position yet again of missing out because of the blockage of the city mayor and the previous, to become get a mayoral authority. And now, as I say, we've got these rules. We put in one bid, as the acting leader said, which was rejected. So now we're forced into something else. It doesn't leave a good taste in anyone's mouth. And I think residents are somewhat, for the feedback I've got, are somewhat concerned about things. But that's also because at the moment, whilst it would be nice if we could agree a deal with the districts and we could come up with a joint approach, I go back to the fact at the moment those other authorities don't seem to be engaging with county rather than the other way, from what I understand, and therefore it's very difficult to come up with a plan in a vacuum, isn't it? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr King. Mr Bannister.
Thank you, Chairman, and I thank the acting leader and indeed Mr O'Shea for their comments in relation to the council's response to the very bad storm and flooding that affected parts of the county on the early hours of the 6th of January. I represent the division of Broughton Astley, and the village of Broughton Astley was very severely affected as well. The brook in the village centre broke its bank, and there were homes along Dunton Road and the closest off Dunton Road that were flooded as well. I've met with the residents, and I can fully appreciate and sympathise and empathise with the really bad effect that the flooding has had. And I am very grateful that this council, this administration, has been able to find extra funding in response to the flooding on the 6th of January. to the tune of £1 million added in order to conduct the investigations, make the reports and do the drainage repairs and gully works that are necessary. The residents of Broughton Astley, I know, will appreciate the extra effort and the extra money that is being put by this administration into the flood remedial works. I urge the administration to continue their good works against the national government to release extra funding for the flooding projects which have already been identified to be carried out. Please carry on those urgent representations to the national government. And my final point is this, and it was a matter referred to in a recent edition of Leicestershire Matters, that we do need extra volunteer flood wardens. I think with the way climate change is going, communities are getting involved, and I would ask that where we have these affected communities and everybody wants to know what they themselves can do to help, I would also ask them to consider becoming flood wardens and to help their community against these devastating flooding occurrences when they happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bannister. Dr. Felton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to see so many people from Great Glen here this afternoon. And obviously, I want to talk about the flooding, as one or two of the other people have done as well. In early January this year, so effectively the 4th, 5th, 6th of January, 55 properties in Great Glen were badly affected. Many residents are now living in temporary accommodation while their properties are cleared of sludge, dried out, new furniture and appliances installed. This is not for a few days, often it's months, and I've heard of one person over a year since the last flood. The Property Flood Resilience Grant from DEFRA, administered by the County Council, is only available for properties affected by a named storm. This I wasn't aware of until about 3 days ago. So Storm Henk a year ago, January, people got £5,000. Dara in December, they got 5,000. This time, though, the rainfall that affected Leicestershire did not get a name. I think a lot of people would give it a name, but it didn't actually have a Met Office name. In early January, therefore, all the affected properties cannot claim the DEFRA grant of £5,000 towards the measures to make them more resilient, effectively. I'm pleased that Environment Agency officers visited last week, as water from the River Sence was a major contributor to the worst flooding for decades. But personal experience from other flood events and my dealing with the Environment Agency in my patch makes me concerned that a report and actions could take a long time to appear. We need to keep chasing the Environment Agency, I've discovered. Hopefully, the number of properties involved should make a difference. Section 19 flood investigation reports are also important to pinpoint the causes and look at mitigation. And I wish to see the Great Glen report being produced quickly so lessons can be learned and property owners find ways to be flood ready in future. Finally, I was therefore delighted to see the Cabinet proposal when discussing the Cabinet for a service investment of £1 million from reserves to help with the effects of the January flooding. And I urge members to support this when it gets, when we discuss it a bit later on today, as work to help Great Glen property owners is urgently required. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Felton. Mr. Poland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, on like others that have spoken here, my division was very badly affected by the flooding on the 6th of January. In some places where flooding is historic, it was worse than it's been before. In other areas like East Goscott, it's flooded for the first time in recorded history, and this is something that is devastating for residents. So I welcome very much the investigations that will be going on into the flooding events in those areas. The Section 19 reports where flooding is causes are unknown, and I understand that investigations were going on where there's been internal flooding elsewhere, and that's very much to be welcome, because until we know the causes of it, this is the start of being able to sort of rebuild the defences and come up with mitigation to it. So I want to put on my record my thanks to officers for the work they've done and continue to do going forward on flooding. In regards to local government reorganisation, I think it's been quite a useful session here actually. The acting leader has been very clear that the her position, the position of this group, the Conservative group, is that we don't want an expanded Leicester City. Okay, we weren't asked about reorganisation. It was forced on us in the white paper. It's coming. We didn't ask it to come, but it is coming. And we want to very much defend our borders as they exist today with the residents who want to remain in Leicestershire. I think it's been very useful as well, Councillor Mears' words that really clarify Labour's position as Labour leader of Charnwood Borough Council. Obviously, the Mayor of Leicester wants to expand the city. That it's very clear now, I think, to residents that if you live on the edge of Leicester, in Birstall, in Thurmaston, where I live, and other areas, Glenfield, if you are concerned about going into the city, then Labour don't have your back on this, okay? At the end of the day, the only party that will be able to defend our borders going into this election will be the Conservatives. And I think that's very clear, and I'm grateful to both the acting leader and the leader of Charnwood for that clarification.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paulen. I'm not aware of any other speakers, so at this point I will now invite Mr. Hunt to say a few words. Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few comments to make. I'll go through it backwards. On the Zoch Bridge, very pleased to see that the work's being done, Chair, but it actually would have cost half the price if it was done when it was first in the capital programme. So we've waited for that too long, but we're glad to have it. On the flooding issue, there's a sense in which we're all in denial about flooding and its consequences because it's linked with climate change. And climate change is something we don't like to talk about because we can't alone stop it, particularly with Donald Trump in charge of half the world. So it is going to get worse, and it's not just a question of recovery from individual circumstances. In particular, and I have experience of this in my ward, it comes down to the assessment of planning applications along the routes of major waterways. And that is a borough or a district responsibility. But it impacts on everything, and of course it impacts on what we're doing here in county. Very often these are assessments done for developers, by the developers. So we really need to focus heavily on the planning applications along areas of potential flooding. I just want to come back on one point on Deborah's presentation on the local government reorganisation. And first of all, I'm grateful for the attention that she's given to the two party leaders. That's been helpful, and I've passed it on down through my small but wonderful group. What I wasn't quite sure what she meant was when she says the government with the government rejecting our bid. That's where I stopped. But the government didn't reject our bid, surely. It rejected us being on the fast track. So our bid, and I'd be grateful if she could really clarify this point, our bid for the smaller county, larger city is still a possibility. That hasn't been rejected, but we've been sent back to do our homework. And having said that, I accept that she would now like to go on to or go back to the 2019 model. So if you could clarify that, I'd be quite grateful. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Mullaney.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you to the acting leader for the statement. On the MTFS, I thank all the officers involved in putting the budget together, and we'll have more comments to add to this on the debate that follows later on. On local government reorganisation, I want to see local government remaining local, and I think one authority for the whole of Leicestershire would be far too remote and distant from people's lives for it to be local, and I will add more to that in the debate on that later as well. On flooding, I give my sympathy to all those who've been affected by this horrific flooding, and my thanks to those council officers and to all those other agencies that were involved in supporting people during the flooding. I would add that today is obviously the budget debate. A year ago, we had another budget debate, and at that budget, we in the Liberal Democrats brought forward 2 amendments to the budget that were fully costed. One of those was to put extra resources into flooding prevention. Sadly, the administration voted down that fully costed amendment. So whilst we welcome money that is coming now, it's extremely disappointing that they didn't support it when we put it forward a year ago. And I finish by adding my congratulations to Elizabeth Lee for representing Team UK at the Invictus Games, and wish her well.
Thank you very much, Mr Mullaney. I now invite Mrs Taylor, the acting leader, to respond to the comments that have been made.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just to pick up on Oz's further information on flooding, I think I was really concerned when I heard that that emergency alarm had been sent to those people near the river, so I think that was very scary for them. And we are really disappointed that we're not getting the support for our residents and business from the government. They've announced big numbers of flooding support that's available for flood defences, but we can't actually access any of that. So I'd be interested to see how we actually get our hands on any of that money that they've announced. To Jewel on the budget, we didn't get more money from government. That's why we're having to use reserves, £6 million worth of reserves to balance the budget for next year. So the government didn't even cover the cost of the increases for the national insurances for our directly employed staff, let alone all the contractors that we then have to pay additional fees for because all their national insurance and national living wage is also raised. So I think to stand there and say that the government's given us more money is just a bit disingenuous, because we are in a worse position than we were before because we've had money taken away from us. So I suggest you read the MTFS a bit more closely. So I kind of pick up Mac's point as well on this. So our bid to government was rejected. We put that in. They said no, and they gave us absolutely no feedback as to why they said no. And I've written to the Minister, and I've still failed to get a response to him. So I am just taking, as I can take it, is that it was rejected. They said no to us, so I don't know what more I can do. It was rejected. So just to pick up a couple of things as well about that. So the Rutland leader has told me probably 2 weeks ago now, to my face, that Rutland County Council will not join a One Leicestershire unitary. That's why Rutland are not included in our bid, because they've told me that they won't join us. I have been trying to meet with the districts. There was a meeting organised by the districts that we were requested to give our availability for the 14th of February. Both myself and the Chief made ourselves available for February the 14th, and then the Melton leader cancelled the meeting. He then asked me to meet today, which obviously I can't because I'm representing in the chamber. So I told him I can't meet today. And I have no more availability this week. So I'm getting really, really mixed messages from the districts. So we have 30 days from today to submit our bid to government. 30 days. So we want to engage with our residents. We want to hear what they want. We want to hear back from them. We want to gather their views. We want to put our proposals through scrutiny, and we want to put them through Cabinet. And all that in 30 days. So how you expect me to do that while I wait around for the districts to decide what they want to do, when they want to sort themselves out, when they can arrange a meeting that everyone can attend. So I have tried my utmost to engage with the districts, the city and Rutland, but it's just not happening. I've seen no urgency or transparency from the districts whatsoever. So I've emailed the leader of Melton and advised him of what I was going to propose today, or what we're doing with our bid going forward. But I have left the door open, and I've said to him, I'm very happy to meet. The bid goes in 30 days. If they can arrange a meeting and have further discussions, I'm very happy to meet with them. And I will stand by that comment. But what I cannot do is stand around for another 2 weeks waiting for the districts to decide what they want to do. They haven't even given me any indication of what their proposal might be. I have no idea at all what the districts are planning to do. So that's where we are. So we're being really transparent. We want to do public engagement. We want to go through scrutiny. We're being as open as we possibly can. Unfortunately, the districts are not. I thank all the members today that have put their views on against flooding. I know how devastating it can be on families, and we've all seen the huge impact. And I thank the group that are here today, and I'll be speaking with them after the meeting to try and explain. But it's a very complex situation. We don't have the funding for it, and I've said previously, the government are announcing lots of money for flood defences. We can't access any of that money. So, Max, I thank you for your comments about keeping the group leaders. As I've said, I'm trying to be as open and transparent as I can. I'm meeting with as many people across LLR that I can do to discuss our local government reorganisation, but it's happening very difficultly. I'm finding it really, really difficult to get meetings set up. So I have to carry on. We need to get a bid in. That's not my timetable, that's the government's timetable. So I need to get that bid in within 30 days, and I intend to do that. Michael, just typical Michael, I suppose. Obviously, you didn't listen to what I said about local government, so I just refer you back to my position statement. It was really clear in there about how we intend to make sure that local government is local. We deliver social care in people's homes. I don't know how more local you can possibly get than what we are now, and nothing of that would change. We would get more local. So perhaps I'd refer you back to my position statement to understand what our bid will include. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Taylor. We move on to the agenda item number 7, reports to the Cabinet, medium-term financial strategy 25, 26, 28, 29. Mr. Brecken will move.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I stand here presenting my 4th MTFS to Council. How time flies. Our 4-year plan lays out the tough situation facing this Council and indeed all upper tier authorities and councils up and down the country. Rapidly rising demand for services and inflation is driving up our costs by 218 million over the next 4 years. This compares to an expected extra income and savings of just £127 million, hence the £90 million gap at the end of the 4-year MTFS that we are asking you to approve today. There are a small number of changes since the 1st December draft budget report, such as some additional social care grant and compensation for the national insurance increase that we received. Although it's important for Council to note that this does not cover all of the costs, as we have a shortfall on direct staffing costs, which is before taking into account the impact on our supply chain and the increases that they will have to impose. The extra social care grant in the final settlement does not cover the extra national insurance costs that the Council will have to pay providers for our social care contracts. The Council had to make a late change to its business rates forecast following receipt of the final forecasts from our district councils, but we were able to offset this with some reduced growth so that there was no impact on the overall budget position. In this MTFS, we have earmarked around £100 million more to support vulnerable children and adults, and a further £12 million extra to fix potholes and roads. And following the devastating floods in January, it is now proposed to invest £1 million more in helping communities clean up and become flood ready, and Councillor Poland will talk more about this when he seconds today's motion. We plan to use reserves to manage a small budget gap next year, but by 2027 this gap is forecast to increase to £38 million and it will rise to £91 million by 2029. The Council's yearly budget totals £615 million for 25-26. Our authority is one of the biggest organisations in the county, and we are spending around £10 million each and every week on delivering crucial services for our Leicestershire residents. We have a £380 million 4-year capital fund to fund the cost of building roads, social care accommodation and new school places to support new housing. But this still presents us with a challenge, with an £84 million funding gap over those next 4 years. There will need to be careful prioritisation of capital resources to avoid any further impact on the MTFS. The pressure on our budget is relentless. The National Living Wage and the National Insurance charges alone add around £20 million to our costs next year. This includes what we need to pay our care providers, which is not funded by the government. We will await the spending review later this year, and we are nervous about the impact of funding reform, which the government has set out their intention to complete from April 2026. The direction of travel from the settlement for 25-26 is to give far more emphasis on deprivation as a cost driver without the same recognition given to the impact of rurality. This will not benefit this council's already low funded position. There are significant gaps from 26-27, although we will continue our prudent financial management approach so that the council remains sustainable throughout the MTFS. It won't be easy and further savings will be needed. The high needs deficit remains a significant concern, forecast to be £15 million next year, with a cumulative deficit well over £100 million by the end of this MTFS period. So we need urgent clarity from the government on SEND reform and the future of our statutory override. Even if it was extended, it does not solve the problem, it just kicks the can further down the road. So we need a long-term sustainable solution for our SEND. Members are aware that as a county council we are lean, we are high performing, but we are low funded. We continue to do the very best we can with the money that we have. We do not want to increase council tax again this year, but without it we would have to make a further £20 million more savings next year on our services. Our residents understand our funding situation, and in our latest budget consultation feedback it showed good support for our proposals to ensure that we continue to deliver for the residents of Leicestershire. This MTFS does not appear here on its own. I would like to thank Scrutiny Commission and its commissioners and committees for the work that they have done in scrutinising the budget in whole and by department. I'd like to thank Declan, Simone and the team for the work that goes into this process we see all year round, and thank all departments for their tireless approach in meeting the needs that we have as an authority to deliver a balanced budget, but while still delivering our key services for our residents. As a county council, we have taken tough decisions and we've planned ahead. We are not in crisis point like many other councils are currently facing. This is down to prudent decisions taken by this leadership and this council and managed and controlled by your officers. We are now at a stage when it is vital that this government tackles the big issues that are driving our costs head on. Extra money is needed to provide services across the county. We asked this of our last government and we now ask this of our current government. We see local government reform as the way to save money locally by removing duplication from the two-tier system and putting this back into service delivery. So members, in summary, the book's balanced for next year by using reserves to manage a small gap, £1 million extra to support flood-hit communities, investing just under £100 million to support the vulnerable, £12 million extra to fix potholes and repair roads, a capital tax rise of 4.99% from April, £33 million worth of savings are included by redesigning services, reducing the cost of our back office support and by using smarter procurement, and a £380 million four-year capital fund to fund the cost of building our roads, social care accommodation and new school places. Chairman, I'm happy to propose all the motions A through to S on today's order paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bracken. Mr. Poland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I second these motions. Every year since I've been a councillor, budgets have been getting tighter and decisions more difficult. This year is no exception, and the administration has once again faced up to its responsibility to the people of Leicestershire by doing what is right, not what is easy. Mr. Bracken has outlined some of the measures we are taking in this budget on things that matter to our communities, such as roads, social care and school places. He's also highlighted the deep and underlying issue we have of unfair funding, which undermines our financial situation. Despite being low funded, however, we are a highly efficient authority. Leicestershire County Council stands out as an example of how efficiency, innovation and dedication can thrive even in the face of financial challenges. Despite operating under tight funding pressures, the Council consistently demonstrates its ability to deliver vital services effectively and meet the needs of our residents. Since the draft budget was proposed in December, there have been a number of changes to the MTFS as a result of the consultation and events which have affected the county since then. In January, Leicestershire was, of course, hit badly by flooding, which damaged hundreds of properties and devastated families across our county. The floods put extra pressure on our excellent flood schemes, stretched from the impact of Storm Henk in January last year, and which we have been told clearly need extra resources to help them manage their workload. We heard that request. We understand how vital flood work is to our communities, and we have responded by adding an extra £1 million through the Service Investment Fund. The work this money will assist with includes Section 19 reports. These are a significant amount of work, but vital for understanding the sources of flooding in our communities. Facilitating public drop-in sessions, public walkarounds and data collection activities, and progressing existing projects through to completion, as well as assessing the viability of potential future projects based on the outcome of the Section 19 investigations. Whilst this council is doing what it can to support our residents who have been affected by flooding, we need national government now to step up and do more to help. Over 700 properties were flooded in Leicestershire on the 6th of January this year, but despite that, the government still hasn't released the Flood Recovery Framework funding, which would help so many of our residents to recover. This council, along with others across Leicestershire, has written to the Flood Minister to request that, and it was subsequently raised in person by Edward Arger MP during the Flood Minister's visit to Melton last month. There is still time for government to change its position on this and support our residents in the time of need, and I very much encourage them to do that. Other changes since the draft MTFS in December include Leicestershire County Council being hit by the national insurance increases due to come in April this year. The government's job tax in the latest national budget will see LCC losing approximately £1.5 million. Our total increase of £4.4 million being partly offset by a grant we think will be about £2.9 million. We do at least get some of this cost offset, and in that sense we are more fortunate than private sector businesses across Leicestershire who are being hard by Labour's jobs tax, which is affecting their growth and employment. The MTFS has not been easy. Tough decisions have been required, but we only have to look at other authorities around the country, many of whom are funded better than we are, that are nonetheless in real financial difficulty, to see what happens if we don't make those decisions. Councils which shirk decisions don't help their residents. They push greater cuts further down the line. Councils which avoid hard choices don't help the vulnerable. They create uncertainty when harder and more brutal cuts do come down the line. This administration will always do the right thing for Leicestershire, and with this budget, that is exactly what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. Mrs. Rutten.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Deborah said in her closing of a speech, social care goes into every home, and the government increases have affected my department badly. The national living wage, which came into effect on April the 2025, will increase from £11.45 to £12.21 an hour, an increase of 6.7%. In all care markets, staffing is the major cost component. Many frontline care staff are paid at or a little above the national living wage, so fee uplifts need to reflect this additional cost pressure on the providers. Employer national insurance increase contributions in the United Kingdom will increase from 13.8% to 15% in April. But much more importantly, the unexpected measure announced was that the level at which employers start paying national insurance will decrease from £9,100 to £5,000 per year. In markets where providers use part-time workers extensively, such as home care, this measure has the potential to increase costs markedly. The changes to the national income will impact those organisations where there are more part-time workers significantly, which care providers fall into. The employer's national insurance impact on full-time workers, 40 hours per week, will be to increase the cost by 3.05%. But for part-time workers working 12 hours per week, the increase will be 8.43%. Assuming that many workers in the home care market work between 20 and 30 hours per week, the increase in employers' national insurance cost on providers will range from 3.75% to 5.21%. The combined increase of employment national insurance and the national living wage in the same range will vary from 10.91% to 12.61%, a significant increase in staffing costs. Consumer Price Index. Each fee rate contains cost elements that do not relate to staffing. For example, premises, equipment and training costs. These costs are inflated during the 12 months CPI rate of 2.5%. Annual fee uplifts paid to providers are mainly between 7% and 8% across our care market for home care. Care homes and supported living, this is a significant amount for County Council. This cost for increases is general inflation, national living wage and also the changes to national insurance that have been announced by the government. Overall, the County Council have put over 19 million into adult social care providers to cover these annual uplifts. And I understand that some care homes now are cutting back significantly on the amount of beds that they're going to provide because of the costs. And I'd like to thank all the staff who work in the adults and community departments for their hard work. Councillor Parton, my cabinet support, will go on to highlight all our achievements that we've managed to do over the year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Radford. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Brecon for outlining the budget and particularly to the Children and Families Department. It's been an absolute privilege to be part of this Children and Families Department for the last 4 years. And this is the team that in just those few short years have progressed from a requires improvement to outstanding Ofsted report. And this is in no small part down to the outstanding team led by Jane Moore, the DCS. And she's created a culture that is very much focused on doing the very best for our children. It's also been backed up with the outstanding political steer by our lead member, Mrs. Taylor. She's been led the council's largest department and she's had some pretty heavy bags to carry. Now, luckily, she's picked the right support for that. Now, we all know that this council is the lowest funded in England. And despite this, we've managed to deliver and continue to deliver a gold-plated service. All this while the continued rise in demand has affected every single penny that we get. Now, we've got a few difficult years ahead of us as we transition through LGR into the new unitary authority and whatever that looks like. But no matter what, we must continue to remember that the very best for our children is what must be done at all times. Now, I've been so fortunate to have had the safe, trusted and transformative hands of Mrs. Taylor and the rest of the Children's Families Department. And long may that continue, because this is one of the most important things that this council can do, is looking after our children. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Invite Mr. Parton.
If you look at Appendix D in your papers, you'll see a column, Savings Under Development. And on that list, on adults and communities, you'll see Improved Pathway to Adulthood, Community Life Choices, which are day centre services, Lightbulb, which is our adaptation service, Supported Living Packages, Direct Payment Processes, Financial Assessments, and possibly the most important one, Home Care Packages. Now, you would think by reading that these vital care delivery services are being cut. What is actually happening is they're being made more efficient, they're being delivered better, and nobody requiring care is left without. Now, during our most recent, and we have them every month, lead member briefing with the director and senior management, we went through the adults and communities finances. And in this briefing, we saw that there's an underspend, and that's via the impact of vacancies, recruitment drives, and changes in income and expenditure. If you look at the headline figure, our net spend this year is £237 million, and with growth of £14.7 million by 28-29. Now, as we meet today, right now, the Adults and Communities Department is in the midst of a CQC inspection. And during a local government association mock inspection of the department by a former Adults and Communities social worker lead director and then subsequently a CQC inspector, she gathered us round and told us the following. I have never seen such a strong culture of team working, supporting colleagues, values-based working, consistent evidence across the whole range of the department to commitment to strengths-based, person-centred working and hearing the voice of the person at the centre. Great examples of innovative practice, positive behaviour, co-production, quality improvement, inspired to care. Now, this has not come about as a result of cutbacks and suspension of services. It comes as delivering a targeted operating model with its core component, the right care at the right time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parton. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak today in my role as Chairman of the Adults, Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, really following on from what Christine and Ted have just said. This is the last opportunity I'll get to speak in this chamber, as I will not be standing at the next election. And I've had the privilege of being Chairman of this committee for the last 4 years. And what I'd like to say is I'm incredibly proud of the work that's been done in adults communities, from the target operating model onwards, where we have saved costs, we have invested them in the services, we have looked after our vulnerable and elderly to a superb extent, and we have a record second to none of keeping people in their own homes, where they're happier, they don't need to go into care, and they're well looked after by this council. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank particularly Director John Wilson for the work we've done together, and also the portfolio holder Christine Radford. I think we've made a great team, and Ted has just reminded me I'm looking immensely forward to my meeting with CQC next week, so go out in a blaze of glory. It's one of those strange things, really, that you get to the end and you look back, and I think there is a great record of achievement, but I'm filled with a little bit of fear for the future. There's some strange things happen, really. We've made all these savings, and then we have a new government that comes in that seems to want to wage war on pensioners, the elderly and vulnerable. We're happy to let elderly people freeze in their own homes because the government thinks £12,000 a year is a superb salary for a pensioner. We're happy not to fund national insurance increases so that the vulnerable and elderly cannot be looked after as well because we've got to find the money. And one of the truly Trumpian things I think this government has done, which is a surprising thing to say, is that they are funding fully the national insurance increase for railway companies, but not for charities and not for councils, which seems incredibly strange. I never thought I'd see it. And then the other thing which should be highlighted in the budget as well, this is the first budget I recall as a councillor when your core budget is predicated on the fact you will take the maximum council tax increase. Never happened before. So I leave with thanks and pleasure for what we have done, but really disappointed in where things are now going. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Mr. Mullaney, you waited a long while.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group on this budget. This is a budget that will cost the people of Leicestershire more and deliver them less. Cost them more in a maximum 5% council tax rise, coming at a time when people are struggling to make ends meet. Given that 3/4 to 4/5 of most people's council tax goes to Leicestershire County Council, it's the rise in county council tax that really hits people in the pockets. And this rise means people having to pay the county council probably about another £80 a year if they're Band D taxpayers. So people are being charged more, but people still look around and see all the things that are not being delivered. The poor state of many local roads, the poor state of many pavements that need resurfacing, the fact the county council isn't able to afford to repair many of them, or when they do, it's just patchworks that turn out to be inadequate. We've seen bus services lost in my own area in Hinckley. We lost the 159 service that the county council cut back, which is still missed by many people and which is also missed in many villages such as Market Bosworth, Barlston and Newbold Verdon, when it was the only service that connected people to Hinckley and Colville. Parents of special needs students have had to have long waits for education, health and care assessments, and there's huge pressures on elderly and disabled people's social care. So it's a budget that's cost people more in Leicestershire, and we're still delivering them less. And despite that, as the figures show, Leicestershire is heading for a nearly £100 million deficit by 28-29. Now, the County Council's Conservative leadership may say that it's down to government underfunding. Now, to be fair, they may have a point. Leicestershire was put to the back of the queue for funding by the last government, put in last place. But we shouldn't forget that we've had a Conservative majority at this county council for nearly a quarter of a century. We had all Conservative MPs from 2010 to 24. People elected Conservative MPs, they elected a Conservative county council, they elected a Conservative government, but the Conservative MPs and the Conservative county council failed to deliver fair funding for all those years, and we were put to the back of the queue. And the fact that the last Conservative government left Leicestershire at the back of the queue, put us at the bottom of the league for funding, is the legacy that has meant that this county council is in the struggling financial position that it's in, that it's having to put up the council tax at this time when people are struggling to make ends meet, that many services have been run down or are struggling to be delivered. And therefore, it is unfortunate that when they had the opportunity, when they had all those Conservative MPs in Leicestershire, when they had a Conservative government that was their own party, they failed to deliver fair funding. And it is the failure over all those years to deliver fair funding that has compounded the financial situation that this council is in, and that means that people are now going to have to pay more and get less in return. And therefore, we are very unhappy with the financial situation that Leicestershire is in, and very unhappy that this Conservative administration failed for so many years to deliver for Leicestershire.
Thank you, Mr. Mullaney. Mr. King?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. You'd think there was an election happening soon, wouldn't you? Mr. Mullaney, lots of criticism, but no solutions, as normal. So we've heard from Mr. Brecon, the cabinet member, and I was going to say for a moment, I don't want to. I was just sat there thinking, perhaps he should be referred to as our own Doge. I'm not sure he'd want to be called that. But so obviously we've got serious financial challenges. We understand that. We wish they weren't there. I'm sure all of us here on this side, County Council, we've done a lot to redesign services, and we've got a lot more to do. But in the main, we've managed to protect our budgets for the vulnerable and those with special needs, which is good. We've also been able to ensure that we've got enough funding to fix potholes in roads and pavements, which is good. And as it was mentioned earlier, we've been able to increase funding for the local lead flood authority by £1 million, but I know that residents' expectations will be a lot higher than what we're able to do. We obviously continue to see increased demand for the most costly services, which is adult social care and children's. And as others have mentioned, the new Labour government decided to land us all with increased costs via the National Insurance Jobs Tax. Business confidence has fallen, vacancies are down, layoffs are up, number of kids shifting to state schools is increased because of the tax on ambition, slapping VAT 15% on independent education along with business rates, and now this morning's announcement, inflation has gone up to 3%. That's a 50% increase since last June, when the inflation CPI was 2%, according to the Office of National Statistics. So that's economic. That's the well, it was 2%. So we're 2%. You were left with. So you've already managed to increase that by 50% in just over 6 months. But this is a Labour government, as we know, which by the week seems to have more dodgy CVs than dodgy dossiers. What I wanted to say, and also that today, the number of business failures is a record 20-year high. That is absolutely incredible. And what I wanted to say finally, Chair, is that I've no doubt we'll see further pain in the future, one way or the other. But finally, what seems to be a parallel universe, also known as the trade union fantasy world, their latest pay demand on local government, I don't know if colleagues are aware of this, is for a £3,000 per employee increase across the board, with a reduced working week for no loss of pay. So just think about that for a moment, the cost that would mean. So what that means is ratcheting up of employee costs means whoever controls the county council after May the 1st will undoubtedly have to look at investing in greater automation of processes and use of AI tech, which ultimately will mean fewer employees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Merry.
Thank you, Chair. Like my learned colleague in front of me, it's my last time in the chamber today because I'm stepping down, so wish everybody good luck. But I'd like to pick up on something the leader of the Lib Dems has said. I don't think I've attended a council meeting in this chamber or a highways meeting where the Lib Dems don't mention buses. So I'd like to hone in on that one. I was told right at the beginning of this journey that we'd like to have buses all over the place, but most of them are run by private companies, and private companies, if they're not making a profit, will want to take the routes away. And if they don't get the funding and supplements from the county council or whatever, then they'll take them routes away. And I was told that if you don't use it, you lose it. So I'd like to ask the Lib Dem leader and all his colleagues, how many of you's got the bus here today? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. O'Shea.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak, but Mr. Mullaney brought me to my feet. You can see that we've got an election coming up in a few weeks' time, and he's in election campaign mode to slag off everybody he can do. But what I will say is our roads are one of the best in the country. I travel down to Northampton to sit as a magistrate down there because my daughter, for the good sake of this county, has joined the police and is a detective, so I can't sit in Leicester anymore. The roads in Northamptonshire are absolutely abysmal. Potholes everywhere. Now, we work hard in this county to make sure that our potholes are filled as soon as we get them reported. Whatever depth they're graded on, we look after our pavements wherever we know they're dangerous, and our team of highway officers are one of the best in the country. And I've worked with them now for 4 years, and they are a dedicated team. We've actually put as a council more money into our roads and pothole filling. We've now got 5 extra vehicles that we've invested in to do pothole filling across the county. So I do take exception to the way that the Liberal Democrats like to have a pop at the opposition during an election period, because to be honest with you, we do work hard, we do put our money into our roads in this county, and we also do look after the vulnerable in the county. And I am actually proud the way that we look after our elderly and we look after our children. And yes, There is delays to having children statemented, but that is a reason of the amount of people that actually come forward now. You know, the amount of children that need special education needs in Leicestershire has grown tremendously over the last few years and increases to grow, and the pressure is put on the department. But we work with those children and we get them into school, and we are one of the best outstanding children's services in the country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. I don't believe that any other people want to make a comment. Mr. Hunt, this is your opportunity.
Sorry, Mr. Hunt.
Yeah, that's I'm looking at Mr. Hunt now. Yeah, Mr. Hunt, your opportunity. Yeah.
Things to say. We will be opposing the MTFS, as you would expect from a Labour group with a very conservative approach to things. I would like to thank the officers who've prepared this, and it's been difficult with a number of different versions as we've gone through from December on many of the figures. The reason why we're not happy with this is particularly because, far from being a 4-year financial strategy, it's really focused on the next year, because there's no information really about how we can possibly meet the deficits that are down there. And if members, when they go home, can look up last year's figures, you'll find that there was no real anticipation of what was to come this year, but there was a list of measures that would be taken to address things, and that list is not really adequate this year. It matters because figures change. Have changed quite a lot since last year. And in particular, the equalisation reserve, that's the one that bit of money we can pass from year to year to equalise things out, was running at 0 last year, 0 for this year, and I think we were using it up last year, if you understand which is this year and which is last year. This year, it's standing about £65 million. Now, if the authority was in such difficulty, how did it manage to build an equalisation reserve of £65 million? I'll come to back to that in a minute. But also, the budget anticipates there will be no social care addition after this year. Well, we've not been told that, and a government would be foolish, in my view, even a Labour government, to deny the social care addition, and yet that's not in the budget. Throughout this process, it's been very difficult for Labour members because everything that's mentioned has come through. It has been terrible, you know, and yet when some extra money has come in, you've described it as have you described it as being wiped out? You know, so the government supplies some money for potholes, and that's wiped out by something else, which you're having to pay for. So anyway, we hope that the language behind the budget will improve as time goes by. I want to come back to the equalisation budget, and then I finished. Just like the last Conservative government left us behind a big black hole, you know, money that was promised but not funded. And I know you won't be surprised to know that we've got our own black hole. We've got £50 million deficit in children's social care. So how are we going to meet that? Now, obviously, reading through the budget, the equalisation reserve refers to that, and it says it might be used for children's social care. Well, £50 million in there would be coming, of deficit would come in quite handy if you've got £65 million addition. So maybe that's what it's to pay for, this big reserve. But if so, we'll pay off the deficit to the end of this year, when it's due, It's due to be paid off then. But we'd be building it up again after that. And there's no reference to that in the budget. In addition to that, we're piling up millions into future investment in Leicestershire. Now, that sounds good, but we're thinking of another £20 million on a roundabout with a Costa coffee thing. And we say, well, it's making more money. But the money in this authority, if we've got those millions, and we're budgeting more millions for that, the money has got to go, first of all, on where we are paying far too much for private children's homes in particular, and private children's settings for people who have great difficulties. These are huge sums we're paying for that, and yet we're investing in Costa Coffee drive-thrus. It doesn't make sense. So those are several of the reasons why we're opposing the budget. That's not to say we're opposing many of the good things in the budget, but you can't pick and choose. And we have to be grateful for the money that we're receiving, not only in potholes, but on flood relief before it's wiped out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Hunt. Mr Payne.
Thank you, Chairman. So, like Mr Richardson and a few others in this chamber, this will be my last opportunity to speak at full council, because I won't be standing again at the next election. So I want to take this opportunity to not only thank colleagues and particularly the Chief Exec and other people that have helped me along my local government career to date, and it's been most enjoyable, dealing with some of the challenges Leicestershire faced in all sorts of roles and capacities here. But I wanted to also take the opportunity to just talk more generally about the budget, not specifically the motion before us, because of course I'll support that motion, and I know how hard the administration here works to balance the budget, along with the officers, of course, each year. But I just want to pick up on a few themes that I've heard mentioned, which is, we're paying more cost and getting less, which is a sad reality. I think the reality is we peoples in the UK are getting poorer and poorer. We are 30% less wealthier than the average US citizen. That's how far behind we have, and that's partly because tax thresholds have been frozen, so we're paying more and more tax as inflation creeps in, and we're having less and less disposable income to spend. And what disposable income people do have left has to go on paying council tax, etc., which is ever increasing. So my concern is, again, for the future, we cannot have a situation where if the government are, say, to spend more on defence, for instance, yet again it will be unprotected departments like local government that has to somehow either cut or find more money. And no doubt the government will find it acceptable to shunt that cost onto local council taxpayers. The council tax bill for many thousands of people in Leicestershire is probably the second highest bill they face every single month next to their mortgage. And it's getting ever more expensive. And whilst we have a situation where houses are illiquid, it's not like people can just sell up and downsize for all sorts of reasons, they face that dilemma potentially of being able to afford to pay their council tax or not. And I can see in the report before us the actual collection fund at the collection authorities this year are down. So that's a warning sign. Whoever becomes the next administration will have to grapple with local government consolidation in Leicestershire. That's coming. And I have to say, 7B of this report is about the devolution. I didn't speak to the leader's statement, but I agree with the principle of unitary, because any business out there that has financial challenges would be forced to consolidate some way or another. And that's what we must do in Leicestershire. We need to consolidate to save those monies, to protect the taxpayers of Leicestershire that are finding it ever more difficult to meet their costs. And like I say, the council tax bill is probably the single greatest cost they face. One further point, many of you will know I'm a fully trained investment manager, qualified pension advisor. And I can't help noting over the last few years what's happening with local government pensions. And I know there's a pensions bill coming through Parliament later this year. It is very much concerning. We've already heard about the jobs tax and the national insurance, employees' national insurance, and the impact that's having on the supply chain to Leicestershire Council. Now, that's increasing our costs here. But it cannot be fair, surely, that the average employer out there in the private sector will probably contribute 3% employee contributions. Here at the Leicestershire County Council, we're contributing as an employer contribution nearly 30%. And the council taxpayers of Leicestershire are paying for that. Pension funding needs seriously looking at because it's not affordable in its current framework and stature. And at a time where the government says that there are £1.4 trillion worth of funds built up in defined benefit schemes, which include the local government schemes, there's actual surplus in those funds, which is why the Chancellor has taken the opportunity to perhaps use some of those funds to do something with it on a national level. But it just seems bizarre to me that we'll continue to charge such high amounts of council tax, feeding through into the revenue budgets, which include the pension contributions here at Leicestershire County Council, when there are actual surpluses in defined benefit schemes. It's not affordable, it needs looking at, and we need to do something to try and lessen the burden of cost on the council taxpayers in Leicestershire. And I think we can start with consolidation by becoming a unitary authority. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. B. Mr. Rushton, Senior.
Can I say, health permitting, I do intend to stand again. Can I place on record my thanks to Deborah and Lee Brecken and the Cabinet for the sterling work they've done in my absence. I think they've done incredibly well and helped me no end. I think on reflection, hearing Lee's speech, I think it is a good budget. It is, as usual, exceedingly challenging budget and well put together. From the opposition, again, I would have to say I'm exceedingly disappointed that there is no amendments at all to our budget. And it's very, very easy for Michael and Max to stand up and oppose our budget. And Michael in particular, who trudged through loads of things which he said aren't being funded. Now, if he'd got the guts to do it, it's a £650 million budget. He could choose, physically choose what he wants to fund and move a motion that funds his bits and cuts something else. But of course, he never, ever does that. The only speech that Michael makes is ready to fill up his focus for the election, saying that the Tories aren't funding this, the Tories aren't funding that. I would, he says, but then he never, ever proposes a budget which funds the things that he says he wants to fund. And also, Max, if there is a lot of good in our budget, and there is, and I know there's difficult choices in there for you, Max, why don't you abstain rather than vote against the 90% you like for the principle of the 10% you don't? But anyway, thank you to the Conservative group for the work they've done, and I wish all of the Conservative and the Labour group, really, because we're all friends at the end of the day, and the Liberals. Thank everybody for the work they've done over the past 4 years, and I look forward to seeing some of you come back here, and hopefully some of you not. Thank you.
Mr. Galton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I can't let Mr. Rushton's comments go about not moving amendments, because I recall that over the years this group, as the principal opposition group, has moved loads of amendments. I can go back to when Mr. Rushton was over there and presented the budget. I can go back to when Mr. Parsons was the leader and presented the budgets. May I remind him on street lighting? We started that debate on installing LEDs in street lightings. You lot voted against it. A couple of years later, you pinched the idea, used it, and saved the county council millions of pounds that could go back into protecting services. Now, last year, we moved an amendment. Just to remind Mr. Rushton, we moved an amendment on flooding. And we proposed, we showed you where to get the money from without changing the fundamentals of the budget by changing, using revenue into capital, capital into revenue in order to invest £1 million in flooding. What happened, Mr. Chairman? You all voted against it. And yet here we are today, you think you'd suddenly invented the ability to put £1 million into flooding. It was done last year, it was proposed last year, and had you taken it, and I think part of the reason you said you wouldn't take it or were unable to support our amendment, oh, well, we don't think we could deliver it. What a poor show that was. Oh, we don't think we've got the capacity to spend it. Well, we could have showed you where to spend it because of the floods and the problems. So this year, we're correcting that. Well, you're looking to correct that. We absolutely welcome that. But like many of the amendments we've moved over the years, it's a bit late, and you pinch our ideas and then use them the following year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. I think nobody else wants to speak, so I hand over to Mr. Brecken for his right to reply.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank all members on my side for their comments and obviously the good use that we put the limited funds that we have to use this last year. Again, it's all about funding. I mean, if we were funded as our neighbouring authorities of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, we'd actually have £100 million more that we could actually put. Next year, we're looking at a £38 million budget gap. We probably, with savings under development, highlighted potential for half of that gap at the moment, savings we can make, but we have to deliver it. And it's a fine line between where we deliver that, because we don't want to stop the vulnerable services that our residents depend on. So it is down to funding. We've got the spending review coming in later this year, and we hope that will be delivered. There was a lot of talk, certainly in the manifestos when we had the general election last year, about what will be delivered, so we need to see that. I'm sure when our chief executive started this job, he was probably a young dark-haired man with a full head of hair, but he's had to live with poor funding that local authorities have all had to deal with over the last 15, 20 years. I mean, certainly I know we've saved over £200 million since 2010 in this authority. We will save monies again going forward because we are prudent, and it's a tough decision we have to make. I mean, I would just say to Max, from a sort of what we do, you talk about cost of coffees, but I certainly suggest you read the Investing in Leicestershire programme annual report, because it's what we do for our residents, it's what we do for our county, and it helps us deliver those services that we're continuing to do. So to us, it's a good return on our investments when we're enabled to do that, and that is what we do. I think the settlement that we have is poor. It's based on historic funding, and I think we need that reset. And I think once we get that, this county of Leicestershire and its residents will benefit in a very positive way. And I think I would. I mean, it's a shame when people won't vote something through. This is a budget making the very most of what we've got and maximising the funds that we have. I think picking up, and it was good to hear Nick talking in the chamber, and it's good to see him in the chamber as well. I think certainly I've done this for 4 years, and I know before my time it was Byron, it's also in the chamber today. It's nice to see him as well. And it's a case that you are enabled and allowed to bring alternatives and recommendations to our proposals, and we don't get that. So I think you've always had that offer. Nick's always made that offer as leader. I'm sure Deborah would make that offer as well as acting leader, but I think that is what we have. We present this budget. It's been through the scrutiny committees, it's been through the scrutiny commission, and I did thank them early for the work they do on that, because I think we do give it a good going over, as it were, and we do make sure that it's maximising what we've got with our resources. So I think other than that, Chair, I've said what I need to say, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brecken. At this point, you remember it's a recorded vote, so I will hand over to Lauren, our legal advisor, to take that vote. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as the Chairman says, the vote on the budget meeting has to be by a recorded vote, and that's reflecting the legal position and the position in our standing orders. So I'm going to read out your names and ask you please to indicate whether you wish to vote for or against the proposition, or whether you wish to abstain from voting. Mr. Allen. For. Mr. Ashman. For. Mr. Bannister.
For.
Mr. Barclay.
For.
Mr. Bedford. Mr. Bill. Against. Mr. Bolter. Against. Mr. Bray. Against. Mr. Brecken. For. Mrs. Broadley. Mr. Champion. Mr. Chapman.
For.
Mr. Charlesworth. Mr. Coxon. Dr. Feltham. For. Mr. Frisbee.
For.
Mrs. Fryer. For. Mr. Galton. Against. Mr. Gamble. Mr Gattaraya, Mr Gillard, Mr Grimley, Mrs Hack, Mr Haji Nicolaou, Mr Harrison, Mr Harrison Rushton, Mr Hills, Mr Hunt, Mrs Jordan, Mr King, Mr Lovegrove, Mr Merry, Mr Mear, Mr Morgan, Mr Mullaney, Mrs Newton, Mr O'Shea, Mr Orson, Mrs Page, Mr Payne, Mr Parton, Mr Pendleton, Mr Phillimore, Mr Poland, Mrs Posnett, Mrs Bradford, Mr Richardson, Mrs Richardson, Mr Rushton, Mrs Seaton, Mr Shepherd, Mr Smith, Mrs Taylor, Mr Walker, and Mrs Wright. Thank you. $35
for.
14 against.
And 14 against. So thank you. Sorry, so thank you very much, members. Moving on, turning over to the page to the annual report of the Director of Public Health, Leicestershire Health, Inequalities in Health. Mrs Richardson will move and Mrs Bradford will second.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm happy to move that the annual report of the Director of Public Health 2024 be noted with support. This is a statutory and independent report from the Director of Public Health, Mike Sands, and I think it's a very clear report highlighting those groups that are most at risk of health inequalities in the county. So that's specific to us as place within the integrated care system. It's really important to recognise these groups and do all we can to improve their outcomes. The report will influence the review that's going on through the Health and Wellbeing Board for the Joint Strategic Health and Wellbeing strategy, and will also influence the wider system. So the strategies that go through the Integrated Care Board and Integrated Care Partnerships. We really have to ensure that the areas in the county experiencing health inequalities are supported and that actions are taken to improve. I also would like to take the opportunity, as I am also standing down this time, to thank Mike and the whole of the department in public health. We have a really experienced and committed team here at County, led by Mike, and it's been a real pleasure and honour to have had the opportunity to work alongside the team and also all my peers in this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs Rushford. Thank you very much, Mr Radford. Mrs Newton.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to say on the annual report, as we all know, there are three pillars of public health: prevention, promotion and protection, and they all play their part in improving the lives of people. It's also important that the voice of individuals are heard in terms of providing services to improve people's health and well-being. And if we listen to people, it often provides great satisfaction because they feel, that, as I said earlier, that they're being heard. And we as councillors want our communities to be healthy. And we know that health means more than being free from illness and disease. It also means having good physical, mental and social well-being. It's also important that people have equity in terms of accessing health services in order to live healthier lives. So it's important not only that we provide these services, but also publicise what services our residents can access to. People aren't always aware of what's available, as I said earlier, out there. Perhaps we could make better use of Leicestershire Matters and social media to actually put out articles and little snippets about what they can have. So perhaps using Leicestershire Matters more, using social medias more in terms of telling people what they can do to improve their lifestyles. I also want to notice that there's also very little growth in this year's public health budget, and that may well too have an impact on residents' health, as they may no longer be able to access these services. And I'd like to finally take this opportunity to thank John and his team. In particular, that public health team is a very, very small team, and they do absolutely brilliant work. And John, will you pass on my congratulations and thanks to the members of the team? I think he's over there.
Thank you, Mrs. Newton. Mr. Charlesworth.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too would like to pass on my thanks and respect to Mike and the team for the work they do with a limited budget. The sad thing for me is I've been a county councillor for many years now, and health inequalities across my patch have not really improved, and in some respects have gone backwards. And until this government gets to grip with the NHS, which it looks like it's doing, we will not have the capacity to address some of these issues. So I hope the future is better for these people. The message, like Betty said, Mrs. Newton said, needs to be improved. Communication needs to get out there to all communities about how we can improve things and the work that they can do themselves. So my time on the Health and Scrutiny Committee and the Joint Health Scrutiny Committee with the City, I think is good work, and we get the message across and we understand the problems. It's just having the resources and the money to deal with this, and I hope the future is better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charlesworth. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much for, I recognise obviously many of the Health Scrutiny Committee members who have just spoken. It's really important to get a report like this because it talks about many of the inequalities that, whilst on a local basis, members will recognise, but I think for all of us to actually see the sort of the detail, the granularity of some of the issues that we face across the county, I think it's important to actually see it in one place, to actually see the comparisons between different areas across the whole of the county. I know Bessie mentioned about the small team that Mike has, but I think we can all recognise the quality of the work that they carry out. And I pay thanks to Mike and his team as well. I've had the pleasure and privilege to chair the Health Scrutiny Committee for the last 4 years, and also sat on it previously when Kevin was the chair as well. And I know the work that it does is often extraordinarily complex, particularly when it's dealing with the myriad of different health organisations that work together across the county area. But it matters so much to our members and our residents that we actually understand how each of those bits work and what they can actually do to our residents and how they can support them best. Because certainly when people are unhealthy and unwell, that's when they need our support the most. And that's particularly where the county and its many officers can step in and actually provide the support that will actually change people's lives, to give them the help, to give them time to recover, and to hopefully give them their life back in a state where they can actually lead it with joy and with purpose. So this is the last time that I will be speaking at a county council meeting. We've had many people today who have said that. It has been a fascinating 8 years for me. I appreciate many people have been here much, much longer. But I wish all members well for the future. I wish the organisation well for the future, but particularly for Mike and his team for the work they carry out on behalf of residents. I thank you, and I thank all of your team members. Good luck for the future, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morgan. Mrs. Hack.
Thank you, Chair. As a full member of the Health Scrutiny Committee, this is always one of my favourite reports that comes out on an annual basis. I always think it's excellent, and if Louise can pass on my thanks to Mike and his team, I'd be really grateful. I think one of the things that's really been really interesting in this year's report is just identifying those individuals that face the most severe inequality, and this has always been of personal interest. Having worked in the homelessness sector for 20 years, actually coming across individuals with a learning disability and the homeless, two of the most severe populations who face that inequality, it's always been something close to my heart. So I really welcome the information in this report and thank the team for putting it together. This is also my last council meeting, so I just wanted to put my thanks on record to the council and the work that it does for the residents of Leicestershire. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hack. Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to also say this is one of the reports that I always enjoy reading, and if any members haven't actually read it, I think they should take the time to have a read over it. I always enjoy reading it every year. So I'd like to say thank you also to Mike and his team for all the work that they do. They're with a very small amount of money and a very small team, so thank you to them. I also want to pay tribute to Louise as the lead member. She has been an absolute exceptional lead member for health. She understands all the complexities and she will be sorely missed from the Cabinet and all the work she does with health and all their partners. So I just wish her all the well for the future, but she will be definitely missed. And I just want to sort of pick up the point that Mr. Charlesworth and Betty made as well about how we promote this. But I think for me, that's my role as a local councillor to ensure that my communities are aware of all the things that we do as a county council. I promote this in my local area, and I think it's all down to us as well to make sure that we do that within our local communities. And just pointing out on page 301, all the groups there are at risk of having inequalities. That's all the groups that we work really closely with as a county council on a really local basis in people's homes. So I think we do exceptional work trying to combat those inequalities, and that's within the children's sector and the adults and all those other groups that are facing inequalities. So I just want to pay tribute to all those people involved in all this. And I hope this won't be my last council meeting, as everyone else is saying there. So I hope this won't, and I hope to be back again after May. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I don't believe there's any other speakers, so I'll hand over to Mrs. Richardson to reply. Thank you.
Thank you. From Betty's question, there is an awful lot of consultation goes on through public health. We have to hear from the people concerned. There's also a lot of VCS forums and community forums that are set up. That's through ourselves, but also across the system. There are directories out there. There's the Joy app that anybody can link onto online, which links information from all the various organisations involved. We do promote in Leicester Matters. There's also Leicestershire Chatters, and we also promote through all the districts. Public health budget is from government. It's not part of the main budget here at County Hall. And yes, it is difficult because it hasn't kept up with costs as we've gone through the years. But that's the experience of the department that has meant transformation rather than cutting in a lot of cases. And that is difficult, but we've managed to do that and have come out with even better systems sometimes doing that. We've also been very successful in getting the HDRC grant of 5 million for the research, which is research specifically across county. It's not LLR wide, and that's working with all the universities. So we'll be able to pinpoint areas and topics that we feel we really need to target. The national insurance hit us quite hard because we support our own budgets through the Public Health Department for staffing. And we also, on finance, often look at the maximum of 4 years, whereas health improvements take a lot longer sometimes to be seen. But if we can move that, that marker more towards prevention, as is being talked about now, we can save more at the other end with the adult social care and indeed emergency care. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. And thank you very much, Deborah, for your very kind words.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Risson. Now we move to the vote. It's hands up in favour. So I ask you all to raise hands for those in favour. I believe that's unanimous. Yeah, unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Moving on to C, English Devolution White Paper, Local Government Reorganisation. Mrs. Taylor will move and Mr. Ashman will second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the report and supplementary report on the English Devolution White Paper, Local Government Reorganisation, including urgent action taken, considered by the Cabinet on its meeting on the 7th of February, be noted.
Thank you, Chairman. Comfortable chairs, aren't they? I should say I won't be standing again, but we've been through all that. So, yeah, I'm happy to second this. I think it's important to just make a few points about it, if I may, which is, first of all, we've talked about it, there is no money there. So apart from in Lib Dem La La land, where you can spend money you don't have, the fact is that local government doesn't have the money. This reorganisation to a single authority will save significant amounts of money that we can spend on services. And so it's all well and good to ask for more money to spend on services. This is an opportunity to deliver it, which is clearly outlined in our bid. In my own area of strategic planning, it's just common sense to have one authority dealing with the strategy across the whole of Leicestershire. I work with officers who have to waste a huge amount of time supporting 7 local plans that are going through, getting kicked back, getting disorganised. We have no overall control about the infrastructure that we are going to have to deliver in those local plans. To stick it all under one authority, A, saves a huge amount of officers' time. It also means you can recruit really good officers into the planning team rather than spreading them out across 7 authorities. And it gives us control over being able to deliver infrastructure for those areas, because we have enormously challenging targets that have been set down by Angela Rayner. They're determined to deliver them. If councils are going to deliver them, the biggest threat or the biggest opposition from people isn't NIMBYs putting it back, it's the fact that there isn't the infrastructure there to deliver it. So this is what we need to do. I give credit to this Labour government for actually showing the determination to deliver this, to actually make it go through, because you're not going to keep everybody happy. If you try to keep everyone happy, you will do nothing. However, they have wobbled a bit recently, and so I'm hoping, looking at our Labour MP here, that they will go back and give them that backbone to actually go back and make sure that they actually deliver it, because we've been led up the hill, as Councillor Rushton would have said, many occasions, too many times, and then let down. So we're putting through our plan, we put a lot of time and effort into it, and we need to keep strong. We have tried to work with the district councils and with others. Ultimately, they will do what they need to do. We can only do what's within our power, and what's within our power is what is being delivered today. So I do ask you to forget your political differences on this and actually support this motion, because it's a real opportunity for us to deliver significant savings in Leicestershire and provide more money for frontline services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashman. Mr. Bray.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think this is quite unfortunate, really, that the timing of this has come forward as it is, right on the eve of the county council elections, because I think a lot of this potentially could be hijacked by people arguing whether with this boundary's in or this boundary's out, because they think it will help or hinder their chances in May. And I think that is rather unfortunate, because what we are deciding now potentially will decide the future of local government for the next 2 generations, potentially, if you look at when the last time this was looked at in Leicestershire. I've sat in this chamber since 2000. I just want to say from the start, I am passionately pro two-tier. I always have been, I always will be, and that is where my position starts and ends. I've sat in this chamber since 2009, sat through many, many debates, many position statements, and I have to say I thought that response from the leader today was probably the most arrogant and conceited response I've ever seen in response from in a leader's statement. And with David Parsons sat there, that has got to say something. And it didn't end well for him, so I would just urge her to just be a little bit more measured in her tone. Look, of course, this is being driven by the Labour government. And I've got a lot to say about that. My friend here knows on district leaders' meetings I've had a lot to say about that. But what I would say is the fact that you have dusted off your old discredited plan and brought it back out again at the earliest opportunity means that this administration here is just as culpable as the Labour government on this. Now, I don't know what conversations the acting leader has had with the leader of Melton, but I do know that we as district leaders meet on an almost weekly basis to discuss this. So I just cannot believe that diaries can't align that means that we can't sit down and discuss this. District leaders are meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock in Hinckley. You or any representative of your administration will be very, very welcome to come to that meeting. And I just think that it's just, we've just got to get this right. This is causing a great deal of concern for our staff, for our voters, and it is up to all of us to be adult enough to sit down and try and get the best out of this. What I would say is that the last time we met with the acting leader, she told us to our face that the County Council hadn't agreed their position yet, and then within hours issued a press release announcing their position. So I will not be lectured by this administration about being openness on this, because frankly it's just not fair. As I say, there is huge concerns, and the take it or leave it approach of the County Council really isn't helpful. She says she wants to consult, yet she went away with the government with plans to scrap the elections without consulting a single voter. So if they are now wanting to consult people, that is a welcome move, and we should work together in order to do that. Now, her proposals have drawn a lot of criticism, mostly from her own Conservative MPs in the county. We're reassured today that the County Council's plans mean that there's going to be area committees and area forums. I won't hold my breath just yet on that, because this is the administration who scrapped the highway forums, and so I'm not going to jump for joy just yet. I'm extremely concerned about these plans, and anybody who knows that the services that districts provide, the discretionary services, will know that merging together the 2 tiers of local government could potentially have damaging effects on those services. And that's not a political point. Anybody who is having to grapple with increasing social services costs, increasing SEND costs, will know that all other services that the council provides suffers. I have sat here every February since 2009, seeing service after service after service being salami sliced in some cases, completely axed in other cases, as we have to find more and more money. Merging those services together will mean that services such as economic development, CCTV, community service safety, things like this will suffer if these services are merged together. And anybody who doesn't think so is just being naive. We hear the arguments about saving money. Will it save money? Well, certainly not in the short term, because you look at where they've gone through local government reorganisation. It has cost millions in Cumbria and Somerset and elsewhere. It will cost billions to go through a reorganisation process. So money might be saved, but we're looking decades potentially down the line. Now, I'm quite passionate about this. I've got quite upset about this, as people might be able to see. But we owe it to the people of Leicestershire to get this right. And to me, getting this right, look, it has 3 measures. Number 1, making sure that decisions are taken as close to people as possible. Number 2, keeping council...
Mr Bray, if you could wind up, it's gone 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Protecting frontline services. And for my mind, the County Council's plan fails in all 3 of those measures. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. Mr. Galton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Bray's comments, I think we need to reflect on those. Now, have you been here long enough? You've been through this before, 1996, 1997. It was not a happy time. It has the ability to pit councillor against councillor, council against council, and indeed officer against officer across the councils. That's unfortunately what happened, and my fear is that it won't be any different this time, and we're seeing that already coming through. Secondly, if that happens and there is fundamental difference, as there appears to be, on what the way forward is, that decision will end up being made in Westminster, and that's not in anyone's best interests. Secondly, restructuring will not solve the massive financial problem that we face. Look at Mr. Bray talks about other examples. Look closer. Look at Northamptonshire, where they split into 2 unitaries. One of those is still suffering massive financial problems. But I'm going to speak as a local member now. My biggest fear is the possibility of an expanded city, splitting district council wards and boundaries. I don't remember that was an option in 1997. And, you know, if you look at that, if you stick a pin in the middle of Leicester, say this to the acting leader, you get quite quickly to places like Anstey and Scraptoff and Thurmby, even to Houghton on the Hill. And the idea of moving those communities into the city, into some kind of expanded city, to my view, that would be an act of betrayal if anyone in tiers of local government wants to seriously go down that route. Now, therefore, I am pleased, at least, to hear the comments made today by the acting leader that that is not going to be part of the County Council's proposal. Fundamentally, I have to disagree with Mr. Mayor saying that he thinks it should still be on the table. But, of course, that threat remains, either from the city itself, who want that, understand, they want more land to meet their housing deficit supply on, or because they want more higher council tax band properties to help their financial problems. Why would we want to give away council tax-based properties into the city when we've got such a huge financial problem ourselves? Or the threat, as I understand it, has come from some Conservative district council leaders and officers, even to the point of commissioning consultants to look at that. I'm completely and totally opposed to this. Now, the city mayor says that people wouldn't really see much difference in the services that they provided. Might I just remind members of the recent Children's Services report that the city's received. We will be failing children in our area to move parts of our county and the services that we provide into that. I beg to differ that people wouldn't see different services. So the message I'm getting is quite clear from my communities. This will be the worst option. They don't want to be moved into the city. And I'm very concerned that this has been looked at. I'm not sure. Mr. Hunt asked for clarity on exactly what was put forward for that quick and dirty proposal that was put forward to go in the first wave. So, other concerns regarding the devolved model on the whole county, the unitary council. Again, Mr. Bray's made this point, but it needs making again. The danger is it would suck up funding from current district council services, which residents really value, to fund the ever-increasing black hole in social care and children's services. And just as that's happened here over 15 years, on all the services that we were really valued and renowned for, libraries, youth services, arts and museums, to name just a few, had to be cut in order to deal with the deficit of social care. And that 100 million that we're now facing, it would have to be looked at to plug the gap. as has been done for 15 years already. Now, mention has been made, if I'm coming to a close, mention has been made that, well, we'll have a devolved model. And I was involved in the scrutiny work that took place some years ago, and we took evidence from a number of councils who've done this. Cornwall was the example.
Just a polite reminder, Mr. Golden, it's 5 minutes.
The problem is, it would start off well, but I don't believe it would continue. It would be endlessly cut back, road back powers, back to the Cabinet and back into County Hall. So, in short, that's what's happened over the last 15 years. And the problem is, I don't trust the administration not to do that. That's my biggest concern. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Mr. Bill.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There's some passion being expressed this afternoon, and it's passion that I share. Mr. Galton refers to the reorganisation of 96, 97, and the destruction that wrought upon public services. I can go back over 25 years before that to the previous reorganisation. And that was when the government forced urban and rural districts to come together. And since then, I've known a whole series of reorganisations, both in public and private life and in the industry, and each one has been the same result. They might have all started out with the best of intentions, but the end result has been people fighting for their own jobs, fighting each other for jobs, fighting over territory, redundancy payments, costs getting out of hand, costs that nobody ever thought of in the first place. And it's just been a disaster after disaster. And I have to say that I fear the worst with this latest lot of reorganisation which is going to be imposed upon us. What I regret looking back over the years is the quality of the delivery of service that we've been able to administer from this place, and it has been a terrific programme of work, starting with the education. This county council used to be the exemplar followed across the country of people looking at new ways of presenting education. People came from all over the place here, and it was at the forefront. That was all taken away from us. The airport, people probably don't realise it, but this county council played a leading part in the formation of the airport, along with the other local authorities, and it was developing quite nicely, and it was all going ahead. That was taken away. Roads and railways. Probably people here don't realise the extent to which we were responsible here for bypasses. The Earl Shilton bypass was designed here. The Market Harbour bypass, the A6, that was designed here. The A14, the work on that was largely done in this premises. And these all went ahead. The first part of the Ivanhoe line was started. Well, the whole thing was designed here, but eventually just the first part was built up towards Loughborough. The National Forest, that was part of the Environment Committee's work here. That wouldn't have happened unless it hadn't been for officers and members working together here. The generations of youngsters who were sent out on outdoor pursuits to North Wales, to Aberglasslyn and elsewhere, that work, that must have opened the eyes of youngsters across the whole county, across the whole city and county, to a new way of life. And one or two of us were able to witness what the joy that those youngsters undertook. Probably the first time some of them had been away from home. The police, of course, the police headquarters was designed here because we worked so closely with the police and we were the forerunners of community policing. And lastly, when we went through, we've been through several depressions in my time here, but we actually provided employment facilities for people who were finding themselves out of work, particularly in northwest Leicestershire, but not just northwest, it was elsewhere in the county. There was so much work we were able to do because this county council had the capacity and the willingness to take a risk and to do things. And I fear for the future because everything is now shrinking. We're now giving up, and I think it's a great shame. And I wish everybody all the best. And I just look back to what used to be the glory of this place, and I just wish that some of it could return. And perhaps we could start thinking in terms of returning strength to local government, so local people can actually not only have a vision for what they want to see, but the ability to carry it out. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bill. Your experience showed there you finished dead on 5 minutes. Well done. Hand over to Mr. Mullaney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure that all of us support devolution, decision-making being made as locally as possible. It's therefore disappointing that what's billed by the government as a plan for devolution looks, in the case of Leicestershire, in fact, it may end up being the complete opposite, and we may end up with more centralisation. The County Council's Conservative leadership has today brought out the old proposal for the abolition of all the boroughs and districts in Leicestershire and the creation of one large mega council for Leicestershire. Now, I speak against these proposals to abolish Hinckley and Bosworth and the other borough and district councils in Leicestershire to create one council for Leicestershire. Firstly, it will mean local government no longer being local. A single authority for Leicestershire, with a population of nearly 750,000, will mean that people who already feel that decision-making is too remote from their everyday lives will see decision-making being taken even more remotely from such a large authority. And I know that there's been talk about, well, there'll be these local area committees that may make decisions. But given how quickly the administration has changed the contents of its plans with the boundaries of Leicester and other things, I don't think we can be sure that there won't be changes and that these things will guarantee to be delivered. Now, the message from the government which the County Council is echoing with its plans for one council for all of Leicestershire is that as far as local government's concerned, the bigger is better. The government seems to think that with local government in huge financial difficulty, it can create councils that are too big to fail. Yet, Birmingham City Council failed, and it was the biggest council in Europe. So the idea that just making large councils makes it more viable is not necessarily the case. Also, scrapping all these boroughs and district councils will mean losing local knowledge. For example, the local housing teams who know the tenants in their area. Moving over to one authority may well mean that local knowledge is lost. Local councils do lots of work with voluntary and local community groups. Again, it's a risk that that could be lost. The Leicestershire County Council was set out in its budget statement today is facing a deficit of nearly £100 million by 2028-2029. It's certainly the case that local government is in financial difficulty across the country. But is it the case that scrapping boroughs and districts and creating huge unitary authorities is the answer to that problem? Well, some years ago, the government scrapped all the boroughs and districts in Shropshire and created one unitary authority for Shropshire. Yet that has not solved the problems for that county, and the leadership at Shropshire Council are now saying that their council is close to financial collapse. So going to unitary status is not a guaranteed solution to the problem of local government's lack of finance. The government seems keen to go ahead with these plans because they believe it will save money to create these mega councils. Yet the evidence for this is very uncertain. There have been local government reorganisations recently in Cumbria and in Somerset, and these run into the costs of tens of millions of pounds. To now do this for the whole of England is likely to cost hundreds of millions, if not billions, of pounds. So I don't necessarily see that, at least in the short to medium term, it will bring any financial savings. It will also cause huge disruption. It will mean council officers spending their time preparing for reorganisations of councils rather than concentrating on delivering services for residents. I and the Liberal Democrats believe that the plan to scrap the boroughs and districts in Leicestershire to create one mega authority would be a disaster. It would mean local government no longer being local. It will mean decision making being taken more remote from people's everyday lives. It will mean many of the discretionary local services that boroughs and districts provide could potentially be lost. It will mean huge disruption as people have to make way for the old councils being abolished and the new mega council being created, and it potentially could mean the loss of knowledge that local officers have of their local areas, and it will cost a huge amount of money without necessarily making any savings. Scrapping the boroughs and districts in Leicestershire and creating one mega council for the county is wrong. These plans should be dropped, and we in the Liberal Democrats will totally oppose them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mullaney. Mr. King.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Mr. Mullaney for what he's just said. So just want to mention a few things. So Bath and North East Somerset, Dorset, Kingston-upon-Hull, Somerset, Westmoreland, Inverness, West Berkshire, Windsor and Maidenhead. Now, what have they got all in common? They're actually unitary authorities run by, guess what, the Liberal Democrats. So, and in some of those, except that not all of those are large like Leicestershire, but Somerset and Dorset and Bath, they are very large geographical areas, and they're run by the Liberal Democrats. So I think you do know a little bit more about this, and you know, maybe that's more what you're talking about, the political, it's political opportunism for you. But as I said earlier, you know, I was involved in this in 2019 when I was a leader at one of the district councils. We were then faced with the response, as one or two others here were as well, to the then county council's proposal, and we had discussions amongst the districts. But guess what? The districts couldn't actually agree what they actually wanted, and the result of that is we never actually got any further than kind of a very early phase of responding to county. But in the meantime, the government of the day said, actually, we don't want to do this, and rejected the request from the county council to have a local government reorganisation. And then subsequent attempts, as I said earlier, to get a mayoral combined authority were objected to by the Labour City Mayor, and so we didn't get that either. So at the moment, there isn't another proposal that we've seen or anyone's seen from the other group, the lower tier authorities, to actually put forward. And as the acting leader said, the attempts to have that discussion and dialogue haven't been successful as yet for a variety of different reasons. And there is a very short window, and whilst I'm sure it doesn't need to be a full business case, it would be helpful for all of us if there was some agreement, rather than just arguing about, well, we don't like your scheme, we like your scheme, and going backwards and forwards like that. Whether we could actually get to that level of maturity and that discussion, because we haven't managed to get there before, and nothing I'm hearing so far from the Liberal Democrats or Labour persuades me that we'll be able to do that now. You know, I wasn't a member of the County Council in 2019, along with other people, some other people here as well. So I'm not completely au fait with the proposal from the County Council from 2019, and it'll be something I'll have to read when I see it. But without, as I said, in the absence of any other positive proposal, I'm not really sure what else, as County Councillors, we can actually support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Payne.
Thank you. Again, I can speak quite freely, can't I, because I'm not fettered by an election, but I feel it's quite a timely report to speak to, because I've built up a lot of experience in local government. I've led a district council, I've held most cabinet positions, and I've had first-hand experience and foresight of the inner workings of a council. So firstly, can I just say I do respect the emotional approach to this issue, particularly displayed by Mr. Bray. I get the local identity issue, and I believe that local elected members who are particularly connected to their patches, you know, give a great deal of weight to that local identity. And I can also see, having been a district council leader previously some of the benefits to having a district council. But the reality is we have to deal with what is now and not some kind of fantasy land or ideal that we'd like things to be. The reality is local government is short of money. It's not being helped particularly by our national government, and it's certainly not being helped by macroeconomics. And I said earlier on that one of the things we can do to try and mitigate against those cost pressures, etc., is to consolidate and streamline. I happen to agree, however, that there has to be some benefit to the local taxpayer, though. So if savings are to be made, and I'll go into in a moment where I believe many savings can be made, but some of those savings somehow need to be passed on to the taxpayer, either by a freezing of their council tax for a period of time or an actual reduction. And if I'm not mistaken, the 2019 proposal, I think at the time, I might stand corrected, but had a proposal within it to reduce the overall burden of council tax on individuals at that point in time. Whether that still follows now, I'm not too sure. But my experiences as a district council leader, so when I first got elected in 2007 to a district council, I knew nothing about local government. And it took me about a year and a half to get to grips with the systems, the cultures and the processes. I really didn't know much about corporate structures and how entities on a certain level with a certain spend organise themselves. So I had to get to grips with that. I got elected to the county council in 2009, and I have to say my first observation was a wholly more experienced professional structure to the county council than the district council. But I was a local representative, and I played my part fully at that point in time with the district council. And then I got elected to as leader of a district council. Unfortunately, I had some great deal of support from executives, not only at the county council, but senior executives at the district council. But what amazed me was how hard it was to get anything done and the costs involved. I know firsthand because I had to delegate certain functions to other councils, I had to commission certain reports, we had legal services that couldn't take legal decisions without shipping it out to the private sector to get QC opinion on this, that and the other, all building cost into the system. We're dealing with local plans. The legal challenges and the disputes between the particular planning departments and the highways departments at the upper tier council bog down the delivery of these plans. And guess what? It costs the taxpayer huge amounts of money. We're all paying council tax and ever-increasing costs to furnish this dysfunctional, frankly, system that we currently have. Now, I do think there's a danger of certain areas not getting their fair share of provision as an entity gets larger. But having thought about that, by and large, we do here as a county council, with our resources, we use them very well. And I think the key is good leadership, the electorate picking good elected representatives to fight their corner, to represent them, not to be afraid and to have the courage to bring up issues in the particular entity. We've heard once or twice, and I've actually noticed some MPs in Leicestershire make the claim that all the district and boroughs are going to be abolished. Well, the county council will be abolished too. You know, the county council will not exist, nor will the district and boroughs. There'll be a new authority. And I think that's a key point here. With a new authority comes potential cost savings, but the best benefit, I think, to a unitary is having all the powers under one roof. I've lost track of the amount of times that a constituent or residents come up to me, has queried a particular issue, whether it would be with highway enforcement or planning enforcement or environmental services, and I've been unable to satisfy them because the responsibilities are split over two tiers of authority, and they're very difficult to get those authorities working together to solve the problems the public face. So I think, notwithstanding the potential cost benefits, and they need to be worked out, they're not a given, they need strong leadership and strong cost management within the organisation, but I do think there is certainly a benefit to having all the powers under one roof for the benefit of the...
Mr Payne, thank you very much. Mr Hunt.
Just a few words, Chair, from this side. I did enjoy Mr Bill's speech. I think reflecting over the last 50 or 60 years, or however long it was, the County Council is well worth trouble. And the County Council was responsible for founding Loughborough University, along with a few other people, a few years ago that was, probably even before Mr Bill's time in local government. And I had the pleasure and the opportunity of talking to Mike Jones, who's one of our older persons who's actually left the chamber, about 1974, which is where Mr. Bill started, as it were. And I said, what was it like? You know, he said, well, it was very difficult. You know, people took positions, and in the end, he said, but in the end, we got there. And I reflected on that, and I said, wasn't this the time when we had urban district council in Shepshed and rural district councils? Yeah, I said, yeah. And people said in those days, it's not going to be local government if it's not local, if it's not in Shepshed, if it's not in Barrow. That's what they said then. So, finally, I just want to say about this proximity argument, you know, that, oh, we know where our council, people don't know where their council is. They think it might be one place, or it might even be a parish council. So that's the problem. But as far as proximity is concerned, I think my experience in Leicestershire County Council is that the service that officers have given to local members, and that everywhere has a local member, is fantastic. I won't compare it to a district council because I've got an extremely good Labour council apparently in Charnwood at the moment. But we communicate in a modern way, in writing, by emails and websites and so on. And that means, to a very large extent, distance is not an issue. But officers in this council will know where every pothole is if you tell them. In the children's department, they know every school, and they celebrate every school that's doing well. It doesn't matter if it's Market Harbour or Loughborough. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So I wouldn't want to destroy the county council. Someone referred to destroying the county council. I think we've always had a county council, even before local rural district councils, there was a county council. And people didn't complain then about the county council being remote, even though they had to walk probably to reach it. So there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Allen.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Mr. Brain might be quite surprised to hear that I actually agree with a great deal of his sentiment. I've always believed in small government and keeping democracy as close to local people as possible, which is part of the reason I've been so vehemently opposed to the European Union, something we will disagree on. The problem is this, Chair. The Secretary of State doesn't give a stuff what I think, what he thinks, or what the good people out there think. They're quite adamant this is going to happen, so we have a responsibility to get the best deal for our residents we possibly can with the hand we've been dealt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Rushton, Senior.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought David Bill's speech earlier on was actually quite good. I mean, he is the father of the House. He has been here a very, very long time, and he is right about some of the responsibilities that have been taken away from us. And in my view, it is a great shame that it has happened. I also spoke with Mike Jones outside earlier on, another elder statesman of Leicestershire, and what Mike said is correct. And I actually thought that Max just gave quite a good speech as well on the advantages of Leicestershire County Council, because I do think we have been pretty well run in the years that I've been here, and I've been leader for 13 and deputy leader for 6 before that, and we've been marched up the hill and kicked off the cliff that many times on devolution. It is absolutely tragic, the amount of time that I've spent on it, and John and the senior officer team have spent on it is absolutely horrendous. But in reply to, say, Stuart and Michael, I understand that they want to preserve the districts, and it is a valid point to say it, but local government review is coming. It is Labour Party policy, and it is behoving on us as the administration to set out what we think would be the best structure for Leicestershire moving forward. And I think the only one that protects the villages of, say, Thurmaston, Birstall, Sideston, Oadby, Wigston, in its entirety, from the clutches of the city mayor. Okay, I'm a friend of his, but if I lived in those areas, I would not want to be rolled into the city. So without our proposal to protect those areas, they will be consumed by the City Council if we're not at all careful. And then, of course, if we do have unitary government status, remember our overheads as a percentage of what we spend are quite minuscule compared to what they are with the boroughs and the districts. So that money technically could be used, and in the worst case scenario, Stuart, I think, said maybe spent on adult social care, but at least we would have the decision what to do with it. We may well choose to protect the special services that we provide that aren't statutory, because if we're not careful, whatever we end up with will just be an arm of government anyway, doling out statutory services at their behest. And I think if that happens, it'll be a great loss to local government and to local democracy. So, in the absence, based on where we are now, with a strong Labour government, with a huge majority, and their desire to reorganise, I would go with our proposal, because it protects the people surrounding the city. It's not going to affect me out in my division. I'm not going to be lumped in with the city. But if you live in Thurmston, Burstall, Syston, the entire of Oakley Wigston, even Foss Park he wants to consume from Blaby. Now, he wants that, obviously, he wants the business rates, he wants the people because he wants the money, and he wants to build his houses there. And it is our duty as the administrative group at County Council to seek to protect those people from the clutches of the City Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rushton. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I said I wasn't going to speak again. I don't know what happened there. I think in some ways we're looking at this from the wrong way. I agree with what Mr. Rushton has just said, is that, the first golden rule of politics, when I went into politics, and certainly when I became a leader of council, the first golden rule they taught me was learn how to count. Now, the simple fact in life is we have a Labour government, and I know it changes daily in the downwards direction, but they currently got a majority of some 174. And therefore, they have put forward a plan for local government. It is going to happen because numbers dictate it will happen. So my mother always told me when I was a little lad that if something's going to come towards you, face up to it. Don't bury your head in the sand. Let's work a way around it and get the best we can. So we talk about swallowing up, taking over. This is a complete reorganisation of government in Leicester and Leicestershire. This is a blank sheet of paper on which new lines in some way, shape or form will be drawn to form new councils. And they will be unitary councils because that's what's in the white paper. Now, we may not like it, we may not want it. And, I was one of those, you might imagine, with my other hat on as a leader of district, who always expected it to be there and love it to bits. But I will always face up to reality, and at the end of the day, we have a duty on us to do the best we can for our residents. And the residents are at the heart of what we do. Now, I'm not naive enough to think we will all agree across the county, but at the end of the day, if we can put forward proper, thought-out, sensible proposals, at least there will be something for the Minister to base his decision on. The worst we can do is to not give anything for the Minister to base his decision on, and then we will end up with the worst of all worlds. So I'm an optimist, always have been, glass half full. There are 10 leaders across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. I'm still hopeful that at the end of the day we can all agree on something. But if we can't, or if it doesn't happen that those leaders agree, let us put in well thought out, well structured proposals, and let us get over this thing of pretending that somehow it won't happen if we bury our head in the sands. It will happen. Let's face up to it. Let's get it sorted. And let's put the people at the front of the queue, should be at the front of the queue, our residents.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Mr. Finnemore.
Thank you, Chairman. Very much following on from Mr. Allen, Mr. Rushton and Mr. Richardson and this isn't really for the members in this chamber. This is really for our guests and members who, residents who may be listening online. The simple fact of life is, irrespective of political bias, preference to which structure will work and which is the best structure and which is the worst structure, district, boroughs, city, county councils are going to disappear. There is no choice in it. And I believe I'm correct in saying the Deputy Prime Minister's statement was very unequivocal. There will be no orphans. We have to be on the front foot of this. If we are not on the front foot of this, it will be done unto us. And that is the very worst possible position we can ever have for our residents, our businesses and our communities. And I will leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrymore. Mr. Charlesworth.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with everybody. This is coming one way or another. The County Council administration will have their proposal. The district leaders will probably come up with their proposal. But at the end of the day, like Mr. Richardson says, the residents need to have their say. And all I've heard so far in the whole of this debate since before Christmas is what politicians think about it. And until the people have had their say, you know, it's hot air. And I know the proposal will go in. The acting leader said what the proposal's going to be. Like Mr. Rushton, I share his fears about the city. Children's services, poor rating. Residents of Oadby and Wigston are concerned. We're unusual in Oadby and Wigston in that we don't have parish councils. Get rid of the district council. There's no local layer there to safeguard us. Every other district has parish councils and a level of local representation. That disappears completely in Oadby and Wigston. Town forums or committees may well be set up. When? Who will run them? What will they do? What will the representation be on them? No idea. So I appreciate it's coming, but my fear is we'll have different competing proposals, and this government, clearly, the intent is it will drive through whatever it needs to. And my fear is that Peter Soulsby is already having conversations with the Labour government about what he would like to see. And he's not sharing them. He never does share much. So I share Councillor Rushton's fears. Oadby and Wigston, Thurnby and all of those are still in danger in my view, despite the proposals that we've heard today. So I think we should put the residents front and foremost of this debate and consultation. I know time is short because the government has made it that way, but we need to ask them what they think. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charlesworth. Mr. Grimley.
Craig Smith. Thank you, Chair. I've had a lot of conversations with residents in my division, and the one thing that's come out is absolutely adamant they do not want to become part of the city. They've seen what Sir Peter Soulsby's done to the city, or the cycle lanes. County Council did try to put an experimental one in our village. It didn't work, to be quite honest with you. Nobody used it, and it just clogged at the A6, so they got rid of it. I know people aren't particularly happy about that, you know, lots of funding, but it was something people didn't want, and people in my my division don't want to see a repeat of this, and don't want to see, you know, the city. And having lived in the city previously, I do know that you know, the ruling city council have always, you know, spent lots of money on the areas within the Leicester city centre and left the people on the edge really out of it. So absolutely, I think we have got a proposal on the table. I've not seen anything from the district councils, so at the moment this is the one thing that I can only support, and the one thing that I think will give us protection against that. Now, people talk about local, having been a Charnwood Borough Council previously, and being on the edge of edge of Charnwood. You know, I've always seen a lot of people do see lots of money being spent in Loughborough and on the city, on the town centre there. Again, less money on my area on the fringe of the Charnwood. So I think people in my division that I have spoken to aren't particularly loyal to having Charnwood, and sort of the district councils, they do want to see the services get better, and things being tackled, like, you know, rats around the town centres, you know, the main shopping centre in my village, and the rubbish that's piling up and that sort of thing. So that's something that's what they is concerned of. It doesn't sort of, they don't really care who actually does it, to be quite honest with you. So I'm supportive of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Grimley. Mrs Seaton. We move on then to Mr Mear.
Has been said, and it's been a good debate and lengthy debate, but I think it's important that we've had it here. I just want to ask the acting leader what has really changed between when she submitted the letter with the city mayor and the Rutland County Council leader to now to say actually the city expansion shouldn't go ahead, and what was really changed. Because if we're having a proposal and if we want us to support it as county councillors around here, well, where's the evidence base? What's the evidence to say this is the perfect model? This is the model that Leicestershire residents should be expecting. You'd expect, in this position statement we had that scrutiny, we're going to look at it in next month, and then we're going to put the proposal in. But the thing is that we need to know as councillors what the best scenario is, what were the other alternatives to a county unitary, in essence, without Rutland. So we haven't had that kind of briefing. I've not been invited to any kind of briefing. I don't know if any other members have. So what were the alternatives that we could have said, actually, that might have been better, and we could have fed into that one. So this is the only proposal that we've been put forward, and I don't think that's fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mear. Mr Smith.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. This will be very brief. I just want to go back at Mr Charlesworth when he said that he wants the residents to have their say, which is I totally agree with, but the residents did have their say. They had their say on the 4th of July. And in North West Leicestershire, I didn't like the answer, but they did have their say, and it was quite clear in what they said. In the Labour manifesto, it said that they would have local government reorganisation into a unitary council. That was one of the only things that was clear in their manifesto, because obviously there was the employers NI that wasn't in there, and things like stabbing the pensioners in the back and the waspy women and things like that wasn't in their manifesto that they seem to have done. But the local government reorganisation was. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Smith. Mr O'Shea.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard what's been said this afternoon. I don't really want to duplicate it, but we mentioned Northampton councils, we've got 2 unitaries there and 1 struggles. We don't want to struggle. The tax base, if you split the county in half, would be totally different. So you wouldn't have an equal tax base across the county. One Leicestershire would work for the residents of Leicestershire. And let's be right, we are elected to represent those people of Leicestershire. We want the best for the residents of Leicestershire, not what we want. It's not what we as councillors want. We want to make sure that those residents get the best deal and get the best services across Leicestershire. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr O'Shea. I believe we've finally exhausted speakers on this one. Mr Bolter.
Just thought I might like to spoil this evening entertainment. I represent one of the poorest areas in the county, South Brixton, adjacent to the city. They are very worried that they're going to be taken over by a certain gentleman who's mayor of Leicester City. It's unfortunate that that's the case, but I think, according to my friend Mr Charlesworth, we ought to ask the residents exactly what they want. In an hour and a half's time, I've got a meeting of residents forum, which will be 1,800 people there. Guess what's on the agenda? Put on the agenda by them, local government reorganisation. They want to know what's happening, how they're going to control it, what they can do about it. Now, at the moment, little they can do, because they're not being asked which way they want to vote on it or anything else. Now, we heard that, by March, some provisions got to go in. I thought there could be some way you could actually consult before March what residents want, given the facts, exactly what's going to happen, what is going to control Leicestershire in future. It won't be Leicestershire County Council, be a new body. So, we need to let them know what's going to happen, how their services are going to be run, especially how their housing stock is going to be managed. We've got many people in temporary housing. We've got over 100 families in temporary housing over in Wixton at the moment. It's going to cost us around £1 million this year. A lot of money. Unspecified how it's going to come from. So we've all got our problems, but let's ask the residents what they want. They're the ones who pay the bill. They should know what's going to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Bolton. My final scan round before I hand over to Mrs Taylor for her right to reply. Mrs Taylor.
I think I've run out of paper and ink.
Mr Bray, thank you. Mrs Taylor, carry on.
I can't believe that we haven't actually got a meeting in place. So I was asked for my availability on Friday the 14th. I made myself available. The districts cancelled that meeting. Otherwise, I would have had a meeting with them last Friday. They invited me to a meeting today, but I'm in the chamber today, so I can meet with them. And I'd already told them that I am not available tomorrow. So they can't just plan meetings and then expect me to turn up when they've already cancelled a meeting that I said I would attend with them. So it works both ways, so I don't think that's quite fair putting that there. So I thank you for supporting our plans for residents' engagement, and quite a few of you said that we need to consult with our residents, which is exactly what I said we are doing from tomorrow, which is why we are putting our plans forward today, so we can go out and consult with our residents from tomorrow. So hopefully that answers your questions there. But I've not seen any proposals from anywhere else. So, you know, I can't do any more than I've done. So, Mr Galton, the expansion of the city boundaries, we've already been very clear about our way forward with that. It's not within our proposals, but is it within the district's proposals? I don't know. So it could well be. But I will continue to have open discussions with them. I've told Mr Olnett that I'm available for meetings if he wants to arrange one when I'm available, not when I'm not available, and not to keep cancelling meetings. So we had a meeting on the 8th of January, was the last time I met with the district leaders, the city and Rutland leader. And at that meeting, all the district leaders agreed to a city expansion. So I don't know what's now changed from their view. So maybe you should ask them what it is today. But with the two districts here giving totally different alternative views about what they think should happen, you can see my issues. So, Mr Bill, I thank you for your comments about the past, but I'm afraid I'm someone that looks forward and not backwards. And we could go back to the start of time, but I'm not sure where that would get us. Because if you were setting up local government now, you wouldn't set us up in a two-tier local authority system. You would set us up as a unitary authority. So, you know, it's doom and gloom, but, you know, I can't, that's your view. But I'm here with my Conservative colleagues. We're leading the way forward, and we won't be shying away from those difficult decisions. We will make those difficult decisions as the government has asked us to. We're not going to sit in the corner crying like you lot over there. And my main focus is that we focus on residents as my main focus, not the structure, and we don't focus on our 303 councillors when we only need 110 for unitary council. So we'll be cutting out 2/3 of councillors as well, which will save a huge amount of money. Just for your information, we're not doing devolution at the moment, so we're just going for local government reorganisation. So our 2019 proposals are being refreshed, and that is being refreshed according to the government's criteria in their statutory invite that they've sent to us. So those interim proposals will be submitted in March on the 21st, but full plans won't be submitted until November. So the ones we're putting in are just interim plans. So whoever's sitting here after the 1st of May will be able to shape the full business plan. But we have 30 days left to submit that interim business plan. We can't just sit around waiting for other people to tell us what to do. We have to lead this, and which is exactly what we're doing. We want to consult with our residents, and we shall be doing that from tomorrow. And I still dispute this mega council. We are delivering local services in local hubs, in residents' homes. We don't deliver from County Hall, so I can't see it being any different to what we are on the footprint we are now. So Blake has outlined some of the benefits of it. I'll just mention a few of you. One waste collection, one disposal authority. One leisure pass for the whole of Leicestershire. Joined up health, social care and housing. A Leicestershire-wide strategic planning with the ability to develop the infrastructure needed to support new housings. Savings of not having 8 chief executives across Leicestershire and a 2/3 cut in councillors. And most of all, a focus on delivering excellent public services that all our residents rely on. So you've heard from the sensible people behind me and to my right, and some very sensible words that you've listened to. And I just hope that after the 1st of May, we've got the sensible people back in the room to deliver the full business case. And Mr Charlesworth, just to pick up on your local area committees, that was in our original 2019 case that we're now refreshing according to the government's statutory invite. So there'll be local area committees and local councillors will sit on those local area committees. So you will be involved at that really local level as local councillors, as you should be now. So I don't see it being any different there. We are engaging from tomorrow. So please make sure when you go to your meeting tonight, you tell the residents what our proposals are. Tell them that our consultation engagement will be live tomorrow morning at about 10 o'clock, so make sure they feed back to there to tell us what they want.
Mrs Taylor, even acting leaders are held 5 minutes as well. If you could wind up, please.
So 30 days, we're building our business case, which is why you haven't seen it. We're building it at the moment. It will go to scrutiny, so you will have a chance there, and you can also feed into the consultation. So I urge you to do that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Taylor. We now move to the vote on the motion. It's by raising your hand. So those all in favour, please raise their hands. Yes, you can. It's a half-hearted one.
36.
36. Those against, please raise their hands. 8. 8. 8. Are there any abstentions? 1. Is that 1.5 or 2, Betty? I think it's 2. Thank you very much, members. Moving on to agenda item number 8, report to the Corporate Governance Committee. Mr Barclay will move and Mr Richardson will second.
Thank you, Chair. The Corporate Governance Committee has considered the content of the report on the implementation of the Procurement Act 2025 and recommend it to Council. Therefore, I move that the new contract procedure rules set out in the appendix of the report be approved, and also that the Director of Corporate Resources, in consultation with the Director of Law and Governance, be authorised to approve minor amendments up to the rules up to the 24th of February 2025.
Thank you, Mr Barclay. Mr Richardson.
I'm happy to second that motion, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Richardson. I look for any comment on this. If not, I will move straight to a vote by raising of hands. For all those in favour of the motion, please raise their hands. Carried. Moving on to agenda item number 9, to consider the following motion. NHS Social Care System, Mr Mullaney. Mr Mullaney.
To local residents, it's clear that our NHS and social care system is struggling. Many people are having to wait long times to see GPs. Around a fifth of GP appointments in Leicestershire last year took place over 2 weeks after booking. Many people are finding it nearly impossible to find an NHS dentist. There's long waits at A&E and long waits for operations. It's clear that many of the challenges of the NHS can only be delivered if there is proper reform of social care. This is what the Liberal Democrats have been pressing for. There is a crisis in social care nationally, with over 400,000 people awaiting care reviews, payments or assessments, whilst there are 150,000 estimated staff vacancies in the care sector. It was sad that the government's review of social care is not now due to report until 2028. Clearly we need action to sort social care earlier. Health and social care needs reform. Cross-party working is essential in delivering this. It's one of the biggest challenges of our time, delivering the quality health and social care services that residents here and the rest of the country need. I hope members can support this motion today, calling for cross-party working, so that we can really see the country deliver on an issue that affects so many people's lives and is so important to so many people in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mullaney. Mrs Taylor will second.
And reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Anybody like to make comment on the motion? If not, I will go straight to a vote by raise.
We need Mrs Taylor to second it.
Mrs Taylor?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Michael for allowing the slight amendment that I put to the resolves at the C1 and 2 at the bottom, and for accepting that amendment so I can second this motion. I think it's really important, but some of the issues in here would be helpful if we had a one council for Leicestershire under a unitary authority. It would really help some of our social care stuff. So I'm very happy to second this and support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Taylor. Mr Hunt.
This is on the motion from our Liberal Democrat friends across the way. As we've said repeatedly over the last few months, bringing motions to this chamber, which are essentially of a national perspective, is not good use of our time, because we've all got MPs, we've all got an eye on the health services through the Health Scrutiny Committee. I don't know if it's been to this, but I suspect not. And so we're forced once again to abstain on this. I could go on, but it's getting late, and that's where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Hunt. I'm not aware of any other one who wants to make a comment, so we'll go straight to the vote by raising of hands. All those in favour, please raise their hands. So those against? So carried. I believe that's the end of business, so thank you for being so patient. It's been a longish meeting. And just to say, Mr Poland, it's his 40th birthday today, so happy birthday.